Reborn as the Alpha's Cursed Mate. A Werewolf Shifter Romance Audiobook. Written by Hart. Chapter 1. The Night She Burned Twice. The scent of bloodroot and myrrh clung to the altar stones like old regret. They had dressed Seris in white, a cruel shade for a sacrifice. The silk of her ceremonial gown clung damply to her back as the salt wind off the cliffs whipped through the open temple. Above her, the blood moon gorged itself on the sky. Below her, 1,000 voices chanted her name. She did not scream as the fire climbed. She watched them instead, the noble women with glittering veils, the howling priests of the moon court, the elders raising silver daggers in benediction. And beside the king's dais stood Lyran's silver hold, heir of the throne, her betrothed. He did not look away. The flames licked higher, catching the blood-rust ends of her hair. It flared like a torch, haloing her head in copper fire. A sob burst from the crowd, too late, too faint. Only one body moved toward her. A blur of black and smoke, the outcast Alpha, Marekth of Ashthorn, hurling himself past the moon guard. The air cracked with impact as Tavros Morvain stepped from shadow, his blade cleaving through the blur like night through dawn. Marekth collapsed at the altar's base, blood seeping across sacred stone. Her vision swam with heat, pain, betrayal. And then Tavros spoke, low and guttural, just for her. "You were born a curse, Seris. But it's your fire that makes you beautiful." Then came nothing but burning. She died with his voice in her bones. But death, as she now understood, was never the end. It was a door. A spiral. A snare. When Seris woke, she was not ash, but flesh again. Soft furs cradled her. The night was quiet. Outside, the sounds of revelry echoed, clinking goblets, lutes plucking out ballads of victory and mating feasts. Her fingers clutched at the neckline of her gown. Not silk. Not scorched. Velvet. Green velvet. She knew this dress. Had worn it 3 years ago. At the moonlight banquet where her fate was sealed. She bolted upright, heart a wild beast. A silvered mirror confirmed the impossible, her face younger, untouched by flame. Her hands unmarred. Her chest rising with breath again. Moonlight streamed through stained glass wolves. "No," she whispered. Because if this was real, if she had truly clawed her way out of death, then tonight was the beginning of the end. The night she had been chosen. The night the crown named her the Luna to be. Her first instinct had been to run. She had memorized the palace halls in her first life, knew which tapestries concealed servant stairwells, which archways led to the outer gardens, and which corridors dead-ended into guards. But flight was not strategy. It was fear. And Seris was done being afraid. So she painted her face, braided her hair, walked into the banquet with her chin high and her breath tight in her lungs. The crowd parted for her like reeds in tidewater. She saw them all again, too vivid, too alive. Lyran, still golden and cruel. His smile rehearsed. The Queen Dowager's stone-laced gaze. Tavros, lurking behind the high priest, a shadow inside shadows. And none of them knew. None of them remembered the fire. Only her. 100 hands reached for her, congratulations, flattery, empty declarations. She smiled through all of it, every nerve blazing with unspoken memory. Until her eyes caught on the figure at the edge of the ballroom. A cloaked man. Standing alone. Facing her like he'd been waiting. The hood shifted, and pale gray eyes pierced through the crowd like blades. Marekth. But not the bleeding warrior on the steps of her pyre. Not the broken wolf who had roared her name as she burned. This Marekth was whole. Exiled, yes, unwanted by the court, but alive. Untouched by the sword. And watching her like he could smell the death still clinging to her skin. Her heart pounded. He wasn't supposed to be here. Not this early. Not before the war, before the rebellion, before she fell in love with him. The music drowned around her. The room throbbed with heat. She turned from him, but her limbs felt heavy with fate. The curse had already begun again. Later that night, Seris stood at the outer balustrade of the lunar tower, letting the cold air slice through her bodice. Behind her, the feast spiraled on. Her name on every tongue. Her future already spoken by 1,000 lips. But her blood sang a different prophecy. "You'll burn again," she told the moon. "But this time, it'll be theirs." A rustle behind her. She stiffened. Footsteps, silent as wolves. Then a voice rough and low. "You don't belong in that ballroom." She turned. Marekth stood with his hood down. The wind caught strands of his night-black hair, the scar at his jaw barely visible in the dark. But his eyes, gods, those eyes, saw too much. "You do," she said coolly. He studied her. "No, but I'm not pretending." Seris braced her hands behind her, hiding the tremble in her fingers. "You shouldn't be here. You're still banished." He took a step forward. "Then call the guards." She didn't. They stared at each other, breath visible in the cold. "Who are you really, Seris Dareth?" he asked. The words hit harder than they should have. Because in truth, she didn't know anymore. In one life, she had been a lamb. In this one, she would be the flame. But Marekth's presence set something in her off balance. A memory before it had even happened. A longing that had no right to exist yet. "I'm the girl who won't be burned again," she said. He smiled, slow, sharp, like he already knew. "I hope not," he murmured. "Because this time, I might not be fast enough to save you." Then he vanished into the fog. And Seris was left with nothing but the echo of ash in her mouth and the certainty that the cycle had begun again. But not as before. This time, she would write the end. Chapter 2: The Wolf in the Shadows. The Moo Feast was a dream she had already died in. Seris Dareth stood at the heart of it now, wrapped in green velvet and dread, while 1,000 candle flames danced across the vaulted ceiling of the palace's grand hall. Every note of the music, every glittering face, every hollow laugh, it was all the same. Just as it had been the first time. The first time she smiled and curtsied and played her part. The first time she let them claim her as Lyran's chosen Luna. The first time she didn't run. But tonight she didn't smile. She let the noble guests murmur behind their wine cups. Let her sister's gaze slice toward her from the other end of the ballroom like a poisoned arrow. She no longer cared to be understood. She had died screaming in that fire. And now, reborn with ash still clinging to her soul, Seris no longer intended to die quietly. "You're making a spectacle," Vanya said sweetly, sweeping toward her with her gold-threaded train and polished cruelty. "I suppose that's your specialty." Seris didn't turn to look at her. Her eyes remained locked on the center dais, where Lyran stood speaking with a cluster of diplomats, unaware, or perhaps very aware, that she hadn't approached him yet. "The feast hasn't even reached the toast," Seris said calmly. "And you've already made yourself the ghost of the room," Vanya whispered in her ear. "Keep this up and the court will think you're mad. Refusing the crown prince's favor? Who do you think you are?" Seris turned then, slowly, a measured tilt of her head. "Someone who's tasted fire." Her sister's expression flickered, confusion clouding the sneer. She stepped back half a pace, but quickly caught herself. "Don't embarrass us, Seris. Father may be dead, but I still carry the Dareth name with pride. Don't drag it into the mud just because you've lost your wits." Seris leaned closer. "I didn't lose them. I left them behind. In the flames." Vanya's eyes narrowed, a cold gleam flashing behind them. "You're not making sense." "No," Seris murmured. "But I'm making history." She stepped away, leaving her sister clutching her dignity like a wilting bouquet. Outside, the garden air was crisp and perfumed with frost-hung roses. Music drifted through the archways in soft waves, but Seris was alone under the moon's pale stare until a voice rose behind her. "Still drawn to the dark corners, little flame?" She stiffened. Turned. Marekth emerged from between two columns like he had always belonged in shadow. His cloak was pulled back now, revealing the full harshness of his face, The scar along his jaw, the gleam of a steel loop in his ear, the barely tamed hair falling into his wolfish eyes. "I wondered if you remembered me," Seris said, heart thudding. His lips curled. "You never looked at me in the first life." The world tilted slightly. Her pulse skittered. She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. "So you do remember." He stepped forward. The stone path beneath him crackled with frost. "I remember watching you burn." Her breath caught. "And you remember what happened after?" she asked, voice a raw thread. He tilted his head. "I remember trying to save you. I remember failing. I remember your hair catching fire and you looking straight at me like you already knew I was too late." She couldn't breathe. "And now," he added, stepping even closer, "you're walking straight back into it." "I'm not," she said. "Not this time." He laughed, a bitter, low sound. "You're wearing the same dress, standing in the same garden, waiting to be named his again." "I'm not waiting for anything." "Then what are you doing?" His voice sharpened. "You think a second chance means you're invincible?" "No," she said. "It means I know how the trap is built." The words hung in the air between them like a blade. Marekth's expression shifted, a muscle in his jaw tightening. "Then why not run?" She looked at him fully now, letting the weight of everything she remembered bleed into her gaze. "Because this time," she whispered, "I'm not the only one with memory." He stared at her for a long moment. The silence between them thickened, charged, until she could feel his breath mingling with hers. "You were always too brave for this world," he said quietly. "And you were always too late." Something flickered in his eyes, pain or guilt or something harder to name. Then he stepped back. "You don't belong to him, Seris." "I never did," she said. "But I pretended once. And I paid for it in ash. And now? Now I'm done pretending." The garden gate creaked behind them. A footman's voice called gently, "Lady Seris, the Crown Prince is requesting your presence. The bonding ceremony is about to begin." She didn't look away from Marekth. He nodded once. "Do what you came back for." She turned and walked past the footman without a word. Back into the ballroom. Back into the fire. The ceremony dais was alight with golden flame. Lyaran stood at its center, arm extended toward her, a silver threaded ribbon in his hand, the sign of claim. This was the moment she'd accepted in the first life. The one that led to her crowning, and then her burning. She climbed the steps slowly, deliberately. All eyes were on her. The musicians had gone quiet. Even the queen's mask of serenity wavered with curiosity. Lyaran smiled, polished and perfect. "Lady Seris Dareth, do you accept the crown's mark and the bond of blood and moon to become Luna to be?" Her voice rang out clear as ice. "No." Silence. She took a step closer. Her heart beat loud enough to drown the room. "I reject the prince's claim." The ribbon in Lyaran's hand fluttered, forgotten. Gasps rippled through the crowd. The queen rose. A noblewoman dropped her goblet. Somewhere, Vanya let out a strangled noise of disbelief. Seris raised her chin. "My mate," she said, "is someone else." The silence became suffocating. She turned her head then, slowly, eyes sweeping across the stunned court, until they found the man in the shadows beyond the columns. Marekth stood with arms folded, eyes unreadable. Seris smiled, soft, dangerous. "Someone who walked through fire for me once." Chapter 3, The Alpha of Ashthorn. The hall shattered. It didn't break in stone or flame, but in silence. Seris could feel it fracture beneath her words. The moment she named another as her mate, the entire court inhaled as one, frozen in disbelief. Lyaran's hand hung suspended midair, still clutching the unraveling ribbon. His smile cracked like glass under pressure, slow and lethal. "My mate," she had said, "is someone else." A heartbeat later, the moon-marked bond between them broke. The sigil that had hovered faintly between her and Lyaran, an ancestral blessing to be completed with a blood kiss, flared red, then split down the center like a torn veil. Lyaran staggered back, clutching his chest. Blood bloomed across his palm. A scream pierced the silence. The queen shot to her feet. Voices rose like a storm. She has rejected the moon's will. She is unfit, unclean, mad. The guards surged forward, surrounding the dais like wolves scenting a hunt. The scent of blood, fury, and fear was thick in the air. Seris stood still in the chaos. Then a new voice rang out, calm, smooth as a blade drawn across velvet. "Arrest the traitor." Tavros Morvain stepped forward from the shadows, his black ceremonial robes hanging like a shroud, his expression untouched by the uproar. He didn't look at Seris. He looked at Marekth. "Alpha of Ashthorn," he said with venom masked as civility. "You have interrupted a sacred rite of the crown. You will answer for this violation with your life." All eyes swung to the far end of the hall. Marekth hadn't moved since Seris spoke. His figure was a shadow against the marble, arms folded, expression unreadable. Only his eyes burned. He stepped forward as the guards approached, unhurried. "If you want to kill me," he said, his voice carrying like thunder, "you'll need more than a ceremony." Tavros gave a faint smile. "You will not fight. Because you care what happens to her." Another step. Marekth's gaze flicked to Seris. "You think I won't bleed for her?" "Not bleed," Tavros said softly. "Submit." A silver-threaded chain was brought forth, moon-forged, old as the temple stones. It shimmered with ritual symbols and something darker, older. A weapon of binding. Marekth didn't flinch. "I'll go," he said. "But only if she binds me herself." Gasps echoed again. Seris felt the world twist. The Marekth she remembered from before, her last life, was a phantom who had always lingered on the edge of her tragedy. Never quite real. Never quite hers. And now he stood at the center of her new fate and offered his wrists. Without hesitating, she stepped down from the dais. The chain was offered to her. Seris took it in both hands. She locked eyes with him. His eyes didn't blink. Didn't beg. But they trusted her. She wrapped the silver around his wrists and mouthed the word, "Forgive me." The chain snapped shut. The spell activated. Marekth exhaled, just once, as the symbols seared against his skin. Tavros turned away with a nod. "Bring him to the dungeons. His execution shall be held at dawn." The guards moved to take him. But Marekth smiled, slow and sharp. "I'd suggest you hold me fast. If the girl changes her mind, I'll burn your palace down." He let them drag him away. Seris watched him disappear beyond the stone pillars, his blood marking the white marble floor in small, deliberate steps. Then she turned and walked straight to the temple archives. Because she had changed her mind. And she wasn't going to let him die again. Moonbinding spells weren't designed to be broken. They were crafted from old blood, ancestor vows, and the sanctity of the moon's judgment. But Seris had lived a life bound in that sacred fire, and in death, she'd seen the fractures the priests didn't speak of. She remembered the sigils Tavros used to draw. The way he reinforced the prison walls not with power, but with fear. She needed time. She had hours. She tore through scrolls, glyphs, whispered the old words to herself. Her fingertips bled from the sharp-edged runes, but she found it, 3 lines of heresy, hidden under a psalm. That which is forged in ritual may be unraveled in mirror. The ritual must be witnessed in reflection. She ran. The dungeon stank of iron and rot. The guards at the archway didn't stop her. They recognized her, bowed. She told them she came to see her prisoner, to grant him final rites. They obeyed. Inside, Marekth sat shackled, body slumped but not broken. His shirt was torn, revealing deep marks along his collarbone where the chains had begun to burrow under skin. He lifted his head at her entrance. "Have you come to finish the ceremony?" She shut the door behind her. Locked it. "No," she said. "I came to end it." She pulled out a shard of polished obsidian, taken from the priest's chamber. A relic meant for offerings. He blinked. "You plan to offer me up anyway?" She knelt, holding the mirror between them. I need you to repeat after me. The ritual was ancient. Blasphemous. He didn't hesitate. As they spoke the final words, the mirror began to shimmer. The chain sparked, then snapped, falling from his wrists in a sudden clatter of light. His body slumped forward. She caught him. Their faces were inches apart. You always were better at bleeding than talking, she whispered. And you were always better at saving people who didn't deserve it, he muttered. I only save one man, she said. You. He smiled faintly. Then run with me. She nodded. And they did. Ash Thorn Pass was a ragged scar in the mountains, a forbidden road, patrolled by royal scouts, haunted by old magic and worse things. But Seris didn't fear the dark. Not anymore. They ran through the forest on stolen horses, their breath misting the air, Marekth's strength slowly returning. Thunder cracked in the distance. The scent of blood and wolves was in the wind. Seris leaned close to him as they rode beneath the cover of trees, the chain scars on his wrists still glowing faintly. You should hate me, he said hoarsely. I did, she replied. But not nearly enough to let you die. He looked at her through the rain. Why? She didn't answer immediately. Her eyes searched his face, the way the storm light touched the edge of his jaw, the way his pain never dulled the sharpness of him. Then, softly, because in my last life, she whispered, you were the only one who went mad for me. He stared. And for a heartbeat, something inside him broke open. Chapter 4: The Shackles and the Kiss. Ash Thorn was not a village. It was a wound, half-healed and rotting. The stone ruins jutted out from the forest like broken teeth, walls scorched from an old war no bard dared to sing. Ivy crawled over the burnt bones of homes. The air smelled of wet earth, fire, and loss. But it was shelter. The exiled wolves who remained, thin, scarred, wide-eyed, recognized Marekth the moment they saw him. No one asked why he returned. They simply parted, nodding grimly, letting him and the girl pass into the darkness without a word. Seris collapsed beside him beneath what remained of a stone arch, her palms scraped, her cloak soaked through. The ride had drained her. Her limbs ached, her thoughts blurred with everything she'd refused to feel since the ballroom. Marekth sat against a pillar, jaw clenched, a dark gash across his ribs leaking through torn fabric. You're bleeding again, she said, voice hoarse. He gave her a look. I'm always bleeding. And always pretending it doesn't matter. You're one to talk. She knelt beside him, tearing the sleeve from her undershift. Lift your arm. He hesitated, just long enough to remind her he hated being helped. Then he obeyed. The skin beneath was shredded. She pressed the cloth to it, and he flinched. You didn't have to say my name, she said, quietly as she tied the cloth. I did. You could have walked away. I couldn't. Their eyes locked. The silence grew taut, heavy with all the things neither of them would admit. And then she felt it. A heat blooming in her chest, slow and unnatural. Her breath caught. Marekth frowned. What does that smell? She pulled back. It's not me. But it was. The warmth was spreading, her limbs turning molten. Her blood beat in her ears. The bond mark under her sternum, the one that should have died with her last life, was glowing faintly beneath her skin. Marekth recoiled, pressing a hand to his temple. Shit. What did you do? I didn't mean to activate it, she staggered to her feet. The moonmark bond. It was meant to flare when two fated souls aligned. But this wasn't a mating pull. This was wildfire. Raw, chaotic, forced. He was breathing hard now, his pupils blown wide. The scent in the air, hers, his, crashing together like waves in a storm, was suffocating. I need to, she whispered. Don't run. I'm not. But she already was. The Muel cave was an old memory. She'd stumbled across it once in her last life, chasing an injured fox. Now she dove into it like a sanctuary, shedding her cloak, plunging her body into the glacial pool. The cold bit her skin, numbing the bond's fire. Her breathing slowed. The frenzy dulled. She closed her eyes. Inhaled. A shadow fell across the water. You really think a little frostbite can keep me out? Her eyes snapped open. Marekth stood at the edge of the pool, wet from rain, fury radiating off of him like heat. His shirt was gone. The blood from his wound had smeared down his chest, mixing with the sweat of his skin. His eyes glowed faintly in the dark. You followed me, she said. You're burning. So am I. His voice was thick, ragged with restraint. I didn't mean to bind us. I don't care, he growled. I care that you're in pain. He stepped into the pool. She moved back. Marekth, I won't touch you. Unless you ask. The water rippled between them. Her breath hitched. I'm not afraid of you, she whispered. Then you're a fool. He was in front of her now, inches away. The heat between them pulsed like a second heartbeat. His hands rose, not to grab, but hover. Hover at her waist, her jaw, as if every instinct screamed to pull her close, but something deeper held him back. I can smell it on you, he said, voice raw. The fear. The desire. The shame. I don't want this. Neither do I. And yet neither of them moved away. Seris felt tears sting her eyes, not from fear, but the unbearable weight of restraint. His forehead touched hers. I remember the way you screamed, he whispered. When they burned you. She choked on breath. I couldn't reach you. I tried. But they tore me down like a dog. She placed a hand on his chest. His heart thudded wildly. I didn't want to die alone, she said. You didn't, he said. Not truly. Then his lips brushed hers. Not a kiss. A question. A chain, offered freely. She answered it. The kiss that followed wasn't gentle. It was war. When the cave's silence returned, they lay against stone, still clothed, breathless, soaked. The bond had dimmed, but not broken. Seris curled against his side, heart still racing. Marekth's arm cradled her protectively, his other hand clenched in the water's edge. We're not normal, are we? She asked, voice trembling. Never have been. She exhaled, staring up at the flickering moonlight against the cave's roof. Why do I feel like I'm still burning? Because you are, said a new voice. They both sat up. A man stood at the cave's entrance. Hooded, staff in hand, his eyes covered with ceremonial cloth. He smelled of old moss and holy ash. Seris recognized him, though she had never met him in this life. Elias, she breathed. The moon priest. I was, the man said, stepping closer. Before I saw what the temple truly is. He came to stand before her. You carry the blood of the old flame. I don't understand. You were born from the lunar rite, but your mark, your bond, has been corrupted. Her hand flew to her sternum. Elias tilted his head. That isn't a natural bond. It was carved into your spirit. Forced. Marekth rose, voice low. Explain. The blind priest knelt. Reached out. His fingers hovered over Seris's chest, never touching. The mark responds to fire and soul. But yours carries a signature. His blind eyes turned toward her, sudden and chillingly alert. Tell me, Seris Dareth, whose blood did they use to bind you? She went cold. Tavros. Only he had been close enough. Only he had held the blade that pricked her during the Mufast ritual. Only he would have known how to twist the spell into something binding, addictive, inescapable. Her hands trembled. I didn't know, she whispered. Marekth's eyes darkened. Then it's not just fate that ties us. It's manipulation. Elias nodded. And it will not let go easily. Chapter 5, The High Lord's Game. The letter came folded in rose-scented vellum, sealed with the Dareth sigil. It arrived by hawk at dusk, when the last streaks of sun made the ash-thorn pass bleed gold. Seris turned it over in her hands again and again, not yet breaking the seal. Her breath caught the way it always did when the past reached out, clawed and blood-tipped. Don't, Marekth said behind her. That's not your sister's handwriting. You don't know that. I know Tavros, he said, stepping into the ruined hall where she'd taken the letter. I know how he plays. Seris didn't reply. The fire crackled low in the hearth. The silence stretched, taut and dangerous. Seris. It could be real, she said, finally. Vanya, she wouldn't lie about this. Not after. She would. She did. And she'll do it again if he commands it. She looked up at him. The scar beneath his eye caught the firelight, stark and brutal. He looked like a man who had stopped believing in kindness a long time ago. He's in her head, Marekth continued. Just like Lyran. Just like the council. You saw what Elias said. Your mark, your blood, it's been rewritten. He doesn't need chains to break people. He just needs belief. Her throat tightened. If he truly controls the council, then somewhere in the city, somewhere, he's keeping the original bond. The one he carved into me. And you think walking into the capital is the best way to find it? I think, she said slowly, that hiding will not save me. Not this time. Tavros stood at the center of the Silverfen court, calm and draped in white ceremonial robes. The chamber reeked of wolf musk and smoke, and yet he seemed untouched by the stench of politics. He never raised his voice. He never had to. The accusation he read was like poison wrapped in silk. Seris Dareth, once betrothed to the crown, is hereby declared a traitor to the realm. She consorted with a rogue alpha. She desecrated the Mufast rite. She attempted to destabilize the bloodline succession. Let it be known, the High Temple condemns her. By order of the Council and the Moon Throne, she is to be taken alive and her corrupted bond purged in fire. No one questioned the decree. No one dared. Not even Lyran, who sat like a shadow of his former self, his skin pale and glistening, a faint pulse of silver ever flickering in his pupils. His fingers twitched beside the goblet he hadn't touched. A tremor danced across his mouth and then was gone. At night, the dreams came for him. They came cloaked in incense, in the sound of dripping water, in whispers that slid under the doors and into his lungs. You were always the weaker one, Lyran. She never loved you. You were a stand-in. A name on parchment. He would wake drenched in sweat, nails bitten raw, muttering of a voice that bled into his skull. Tavros never mentioned the dreams. He simply watched. And smiled. She's gone mad, Vanya said, pacing across her rooms in the palace, curls bouncing with every furious step. Refused the crown prince. Eloped with a criminal. Ash Thorn of all places. Tavros sat at her writing desk, pen in hand, folding letters with meticulous precision. She always did crave attention. She's not like this. Vanya halted, biting her lip. She used to care what people thought. She used to try to be good. She still does, Tavros said. That's why she'll come back. He looked up, the candlelight catching his gold-ringed eyes. You're going to invite her home, dearest. You'll say you miss her. That you believe she was cursed. That she deserves to explain herself. She'll believe you. She always does. And if she doesn't? Tavros smiled. Then I'll find someone who looks like you to write the letter instead. Seris and Marekth stood at the ridge above the pass, cloaks billowing in the dusk wind. He stared at her, silent. What? You're going. I have to. You don't. I do, she said. His jaw ticked. I'm not your mate, he growled. Not by the old laws. I'm not bound to you. But you're still here. That's the problem, he snapped, stepping close. You walk into fire like it's a dance. You say it's duty. It's not. It's guilt. And it's going to get you killed again. I'd rather die hunting the truth than live running from it. He turned away, shoulders rigid. She touched his hand. You don't have to follow. He didn't answer for a long time. Then he said, I never left the first time. The ride to the capital took 2 days, cloaked in storm winds and the looming dread of what waited. Seris cut her hair short and dyed the blood-rust strands with ash root, cloaking the glow in mud brown. She wore a commoner's cloak, a scarf over her mouth, and rode a piebald mare through the side roads that led to the back gate of the city. She hadn't returned to Silverhold since the night they burned her. Now, she returned as a ghost in her own story. The streets hadn't changed, stone-paved and steep, lined with prayer shrines and moon's silver vendors. She passed the Square of Oaths. The statue of the Moon Queen stood tall at its center, now repainted. Her own name had been scrubbed from the dedication plaque. She didn't flinch. She went underground. The sewer tunnels beneath the palace were older than memory. Elias had drawn her a map from what he recalled before exile. It would lead to the Hall of Relics, where ceremonial bonds and archives were kept. She crept through the stone corridors, silent as a shadow. No one saw her enter. But someone had been waiting. The dungeon smelled of damp blood, old iron, and fear. Seris stepped carefully, one torch in her hand, eyes scanning the walls for the sigils that marked the entrance to the archive chamber. Her heart thudded like a drum in her chest. She passed a cell. Then another. Then, "Welcome back, holy daughter." The voice came from the dark. She froze. The air shifted, dense with a scent she knew too well: cinnamon smoke, moon ash, roses wilted at the stem. Tavros. She turned slowly. He stood beyond the bars, wearing no robes now, just a high-necked shirt stained with ink and power. His eyes glowed gold in the gloom. "I see exiles made you bold," he said. "But you were always brave, weren't you? Even when you burned." She lifted her chin. "I didn't come to beg. No. You came for the original bond. Clever girl." He stepped closer to the bars, fingers trailing over the stone. "You think if you find it, you'll be free? That breaking it will undo me." "I know it will." He smiled. "But breaking a bond created with a god's blood, do you know what it costs?" Silence. "Everything, Seris. Everything that made you." Her breath caught. He tilted his head, voice velvet. "Tell me, are you ready to die a second time?" Chapter 6: The Saint of the Dungeon. The door groaned shut behind her, locking out the last sliver of moonlight. Seris exhaled, heart pounding as she pressed her back to the damp stone wall of Moonvault Prison. The underground hall reeked of mildew, rusted chains, and something older, something sanctified and rotting. The shadows whispered, familiar and too still. No one should have been able to hear her down here. But someone already had. She had disguised herself well. The common healer's robes, soot-stained hands, the hood low over her blood-rust hair dyed black with gray bark ash. But nothing could hide the way her blood throbbed against her skin as she passed the lowest vaults. Something below was calling her. She moved quickly, silently, deeper into the heart of the labyrinth, toward the Chamber of Bonds. The scrolls were kept beneath iron-laced stone, behind sigils few dared carve. It was said they had once held the true names of gods, and the true names of those sacrificed in their place. She rounded the final corridor. The door was open. Seris froze. No guards. No light. Only the soft pulse of enchantment like breath behind a veil. She stepped forward. Inside, the room flickered in pale blue fire, illuminating rows upon rows of blackened scrolls sealed in crystal. She scanned them, frantic. Her fingers brushed the sigils as she searched, reading names she barely remembered from her previous life. Then she found it. Dareth Seris. Betrothed by high right to Crown Prince Lyaran. Modified, Tavros Morvain, High Priest of the Moon Seal. Her breath hitched. She reached for the scroll. And the world shattered. The stone beneath her turned to silk. The air no longer smelled of mold and magic, but of lavender and honeyed bread. Seris blinked. She stood in the mirror hall of the Silverhold Palace. A harp played in the distance. Her mother's voice called for the seamstress. Vanya was laughing with two other noble girls near the window. And across the marble gallery, Lyaran, unscarred, smiling, the young prince with sun-golden hair and gentle eyes. "Seris," he said, holding a bouquet of winter roses. "You're late for your fitting." She looked down. She wore the bridal veil of her youth, blue silk and gold threads. Her hands trembled at her sides. "No," she whispered. "This isn't real." Lyaran stepped closer. "What's not real?" He touched her cheek. It felt warm, human, loving. I can't be here. She backed away. This already happened. You never left, Vanya said from across the room. You were just tired, remember? Seris turned. Her sister looked younger, softer. No bitterness, no cruelty in her voice. Just fondness, the kind they'd shared when they were children sneaking moo fruit from the kitchens. This is a lie, Seris breathed. But when her mother came around the corner, arms wide to embrace her, tears rose unbidden. Seris, her mother whispered. My beautiful girl. We've missed you. She collapsed into her arms before she realized she'd moved. The warmth was unbearable, like fire under her skin. Then came the pain. She screamed. Her skin blistered as if seared by unseen flames, her back arching as her flesh tried to split open. The illusion cracked at the edges. The harp faltered. Vanya's smile twitched, then froze. And then, do you see now? A voice said. Tavros appeared in the hallway, dressed in white robes that glowed with impossible light. But his eyes burned like coals. You don't belong in happiness, Seris. She dropped to her knees, the silk gown pooling around her like blood. You wrote this lie, she said through gritted teeth. No, he replied softly. You did. He crouched beside her, fingers brushing her jaw. You built this illusion from longing. I only opened the door. I don't want this. You do. That's the tragedy. His thumb traced her lip. In this world, no fire touches you. No one calls you cursed. Lyaran marries you. You bear the mark of a queen. All you have to do is stay. He stood and offered his hand. Choose peace, Seris. Her breath caught. And if I say no? His smile chilled the air. Then the fire starts again. Time passed differently inside the illusion. She wandered the halls. She danced at her wedding. She kissed Lyaran under a canopy of glowing snow trees. For a while, she let herself believe. It was easier to forget the taste of ash, to forget the way Marekth bled trying to save her, to forget the curse etched into her soul. But each time she laughed, her skin cracked. Each time she kissed him, her lips split and bled. Each time she looked in the mirror, the woman who stared back was not whole. And then came the final test. The night before the wedding, Lyaran took her hands, soft and reverent. We don't have to wait until after the ceremony, he said. You're mine. I want to show you. He kissed her, slow and gentle, and everything inside her recoiled. Because it wasn't right. Because he didn't smell like pine and rain and fury. Because his hands didn't tremble when he touched her. Because he wasn't Marekth. She broke away, panting. What's wrong? Lyaran asked. I can't do this, she said. You're just nervous. No. She turned from him, fleeing into the bridal chamber. She slammed the door shut and looked into the mirror. And saw herself, not the glowing bride, but the real Seris. Dangling from the stone ceiling of Moonvault prison, wrists chained above her head, blood running down her arms. Her eyes flared open. The illusion shattered. Reality returned like a slap. She screamed as breath filled her lungs again. Her body convulsed. Blood dripped from her lips, her wrists torn raw by the manacles. And standing below her, in flesh and shadow, Tavros. Well, he said, voice like velvet knives. Welcome back, saint of the dungeon. He reached up, brushing her cheek with mock tenderness. Was the dream pleasant, little phoenix? She spat at him. The blood landed at his feet. He chuckled. I gave you everything, he said. A chance to live again. To be loved. You could have stayed. I'd rather burn, she hissed. Then burn you shall. He stepped back into the dark, robes whispering. And Seris, strung between pain and fury, whispered through cracked lips, Marekth, find me. Chapter 7. Thorns Beneath the Crown. The smell of the capital was different at night. Gone were the polished scents of rose water and incense that perfumed the palace. In their place came smoke, sweat, blood, and secrets. Marekth crouched atop the bell tower of the outer quarter, ash-gray cloak fluttering in the wind, one hand gripping the edge of the stone parapet as he watched the silver banners of the moon court ripple above the spires. "They've sealed every tower," Elias murmured beside him. The old priest's blind eyes were turned toward the city center, but Marekth knew he didn't need sight to see the truth. "Your mate is somewhere beneath the eastern wing." "Somewhere isn't good enough," Marekth growled. He hadn't slept in 2 days. Not since Seris vanished. Not since that God's damned letter from Vanya led her into Tavros's trap. Elias ran his fingers across the braids of runes tied at his belt. "There's a binding sigil over the moon vault. A deep one. Layered. She isn't just behind walls, she's behind fate." "What the fuck does that mean?" "She is imprisoned not by stone," Elias said softly, "but by belief. By the script written over her soul. We need more than force to break her free. We need chaos." Marekth's joy tightened. He watched the procession of nobles entering the moon court, the polished marble steps gleaming with enchanted moonlight. He could burn it all down. But Seris would still be locked in her gilded cage. Unless... His mind shifted. A blood right. Ancient. Dangerous. Legal. One that couldn't be refused. His lips curled into a slow, bitter smile. "Summon the Nightblades," he said. "And prepare the sigils. I'm going to challenge the prince." Silvermoon Plaza was packed by dawn. The challenge had been issued with proper rites, 3 wolf seals, each carved with blood and bone, delivered to the court by midnight. No one dared refuse a blood-born alpha's invocation of the Thorn Law, not even the crown prince himself. Marekth stood in the dueling circle, bare-chested, scars like silver rivers etched across his chest and back. The moonsteel chains still wrapped around his left wrist, a reminder of the price he'd once paid to protect her. The nobles watched from their balconies, gold-laced masks hiding their fear. Lyaran arrived in ceremonial armor, his expression blank, but his knuckles white around the hilt of his blade. "This is madness," the prince whispered as they met at the circle's center. "You'll doom her further." "You already did," Marekth replied. The bell rang. The duel began. Marekth moved first, fast, brutal. He wasn't here to toy with the prince. He was here to draw blood, make a point, force the court to see. Lyaran fought with elegant precision, but he lacked Marektha's rage, the kind of fury born from watching the one you love burn. Their blades clashed, echoed by gasps and murmurs from the crowd. Then Marektha's strike drove Lyaran to his knees. Steel at his throat, breath heaving, the prince stared up at him. "Kill me," he spat. Marekth leaned close. "No," he said. "Not yet." He raised his voice, speaking to the crowd. "Tell them what you know, Lyaran." The prince's face twisted. "You bastard." "Say it," Marekth hissed. "Or I will take your tongue and show them the truth carved in your blood." Silence fell. Then, through clenched teeth, Lyaran said, "The moon's seal has been rewritten." Gasps echoed through the plaza. The high priest forged the names, Lyaran choked. He bound Seris to the altar before her birth. The rites are lies, rewritten history. She was never meant to live. Marekth stepped back. The prince collapsed, clutching his ribs, coughing blood. Around them, the court reeled. Old laws were sacred. Binding. If Tavros had rewritten them. The whispers turned to unrest. Marekth turned toward the balconies, his voice like steel. "Now you all know. The one you call saint was made a sacrifice by your silence." He looked back at Lyaran. "Next time," he said softly, "I won't leave you breathing." In the shadows of the spire, Elias watched the chaos ripple outward, nobles questioning, mages stammering, the court unraveling stitch by stitch. But his face was grim. He turned toward the palace depths, where the moonlight no longer reached. He felt it then, the pull, the tremor in the ley lines, the quiet hum of something not quite mortal. "Tavros is no longer bound by blood," Elias whispered. The Nightblade's scalp beside him tensed. "You mean? He has become something more." Elias touched the prayer cord at his wrist, eyes still blind but his voice grave. A contracted demiurge. A god by ink. The scout paled. He's rewritten his own fate, Elias murmured. And now he's rewriting hers. The spire bell tolled, echoing like a scream. She's not just chained in the dungeons, Elias said softly. She's trapped in her own longing. In the cage he built from her desires. The scout whispered, "What do we do?" Elias turned toward the path that led below. "We find the anchor of the lie," he said. "And we break it before her soul forgets who she is." Chapter 8. The Mirror of Betrayal. The scent of ash clung to Seris's skin like memory. She stood once more before the fire, her wrists bound in silk, the wedding veil dripping with bloodless white. The crowd roared. The flames beckoned. And beside her stood no executioner, only Marekth. But this Marekth was not the man she remembered. His eyes held no fury, no grief. Only disdain. "You thought I'd burn the world for you?" he asked, voice low and venom soft. "Seris, you were a game. A necessary move. Nothing more." She staggered back, lips trembling. "No," she whispered. "You're a tool," he said. "You always were. The moment you outlived your usefulness." He turned. The flames rose. She screamed. Not in pain. In betrayal. And the vision shattered. But another replaced it. Then another. Again. And again. 100 times she relived it. The betrayal, the flame, the moment her own body gave up on itself and she crumpled at the pyre's base like a marionette with cut strings. It wasn't just a hallucination. Tavros had layered this prison with precision. Every image, every touch, every voice, sculpted from her own memories and nightmares. She saw her mother again. The version she remembered as kind, before politics twisted her spine and pride blackened her heart. "Why can't you just obey?" her mother said in a tone honey-sweet and dagger-sharp. It was so simple, Seris. Be beautiful. Be quiet. Be chosen. She clawed at her ears. The voice wouldn't stop. Her body in reality began to convulse. She could feel it, her wrists raw against invisible shackles, skin bruising from unseen blows. The more she fought, the more she bled. Her mouth tasted of iron and salt. But the worst pain wasn't physical. It was seeing Marekth's face twisted into Tavros's cruelty. The one man who had once bared his teeth at the world for her, now sneering and spitting words she had never imagined in his voice. "You don't matter," the phantom Marekth said again, each word slicing into her psyche. "No one ever loved you. You're a means to power. That's all you've ever been." She screamed at him, slapped him, fell to her knees. And still he watched, cold and silent, until something cracked. Not in the illusion. In her. She sat still, breathing. The fire once more roared at her back. She turned her gaze to the phantom Marekth and said, very softly, "You got the voice wrong." His brow twitched. Her lips curled. "He never looked at me like that," she said. Not even when he was angry. The illusion trembled. Seris stood, slow and steady, blood running from the corner of her mouth. She let the pain ground her. Let it sharpen her. Her heart hammered like a war drum. "You're not him," she said, voice rising. "He would have bled for me. He did bleed for me. Even if the whole world was on fire, he wouldn't have let go." The fire behind her roared higher, but now it was hers. She bit down on her tongue hard. Pain lanced through her head, and for a moment, the illusion fractured. And in that split second of clarity, she whispered the forbidden words, the ones etched in moonlight, passed down by the last daughters of the goddess who had once cursed the bloodlines of kings. "By the bone of my breath, by the shard of my flame, unmake the false and return what is mine." The mirror of illusion shattered. The palace disappeared. The phantom Marekth screamed, not in pain, but fury, and dissolved into nothing. Seris collapsed onto a stone floor, breath ragged, sweat and blood pooling beneath her. The real air. Real stone. Real cold. She had done it. She had broken Tavros's spell. But even as her mind fought to remain anchored, her vision swam. Footsteps. Velvet sheets. A voice. "She is awake," someone whispered. When her eyes opened, she was no longer in chains. No longer in rags. She lay on satin, bathed and dressed in silks. Around her hovered servants with veils of moonlight and golden chains. And outside the chamber, she heard trumpets. A court in celebration. "What is this?" she rasped. One of the maids bowed low. "Saint Seris," she said softly. "You've returned from death, and the High Lord has kept his promise. You are now the saint bride of the Empire." Seris blinked. The room spun. Then she saw it on her finger. A silver band. Forged in the old style. Laced with ink only the high priests could weave. A soul bond ring. And on the silk-draped pillow beside her, etched into black marble, Queen of the Holy Seal. Her scream never made it past her lips. Because the voice that answered it wasn't hers. It was his. Tavrosa's voice whispered from the shadows behind the curtain, velvet smooth. "My bride," he said. "Welcome home." Chapter 9. The Bride of the Enemy. The scent of white myrrh and crushed dusk roses clung to everything, her skin, her hair, even the linens beneath her. Seris awoke not with a gasp, but with a silence so profound it seemed torn from the grave. Golden light filtered through the arched windows of the queen's chamber. Her chamber. Silken drapes whispered around her. The air shimmered with holy incense. Servants moved like ghosts, their eyes averted, their mouths stitched shut by reverence or fear. They treated her not as a prisoner, but as something worse. As a queen. She looked down at her hands, trembling. The silver ring still clung to her finger. But worse, so much worse, was the mark crawling along her wrist. The blood seal. It pulsed with heat, then cold, then a sickly warmth again. Alive. Binding. She could feel it sinking into her veins like ink bleeding into water. No. Her stomach coiled. It was real. The union. The divine bond. The sacred seal that bound a mate in both flesh and fate. And Tavros had forged it while she was unconscious. As if summoned by the silent crescendo of her horror, the door opened. He entered like a wraith of elegance. Robes of midnight, edged in sun gold. Bare feet silent on the marble floor. Not a hair out of place. Not a glimmer of guilt in his eyes. Tavros Morvain. High priest. War strategist. Empire's blessed son. Her enemy. "Your color suits you again," he said softly, eyes tracing her figure, not with lust, but with something colder. Assessment. Ownership. Seris rose slowly, the silk sheets falling from her like mist. "I will not scream," she said calmly. "So, if that's what you're waiting for." "I never expect a scream from you," he interrupted. "Only strategy. I knew you'd come back. It's in your nature to fight from within, isn't it?" She stepped toward him, bare feet against cold stone. The pulse at her wrist thrummed as she neared him, the blood seal responding. "You forged a sacred seal with a body that was unconscious," she hissed. "That's blasphemy." Tavros smiled with the patience of a saint. "Only if the body in question refuses it." But the seal held. It strengthened. It thrives. "You are bound to me, Seris." The divine answered. "That means, on some level, you wanted this." Her hands clenched. "I'd sooner marry fire." "You already have." "Twice." He stepped closer, voice silk-wrapped steel. "Once in death. Once in destiny." She met his gaze and let her lip curl, voice honey-poisoned. "Then allow me a wedding gift, my lord." "Oh." His head tilted, amused. "I'll bring you ruin so complete, even the gods will pity you." A flicker passed over his expression. Not fear. Not even anger. Interest. He stepped closer, reached out, and touched the blood seal on her wrist with 2 fingers. At his touch, it burned. Not pain, but something worse. A tingling pull beneath the skin, like vines trying to root inside her bones. "Be careful," he murmured. "This seal links more than blood. It links thought. Will. Desire. She pulled away, breath ragged. Then I'll learn to desire your death. No, he said gently. You'll learn to understand me. And that is far more dangerous. He left her then, robes whispering behind him like a verdict. The day passed in a blur of rituals. Priests reciting hymns before her. Lords bowing their heads in a show of allegiance or performance. Some looked at her with awe, others with horror. A traitor turned queen. A cursed girl now adorned in moon gold. In the garden of the sun, where roses bloomed with thorns of silver and the air was heady with divinity, Seris stood among marble statues and watched the nobles gossip behind fans. Tavros stood at a distance, surrounded by his acolytes. Seris watched him, not with hatred, with calculation. She smiled softly and turned to a passing servant, her voice like spilled wine. Bring word to the High Lord. I'd like to dine with him alone tonight. In the Western Pavilion. Just the two of us. The servant blinked, startled, but nodded. Behind her, whispers spread like wildfire. The cursed bride had accepted her fate. That night, Seris sat across from Tavros at a low marble table surrounded by floating lanterns. The air was thick with floral smoke and the distant chanting of monks. Tavros poured her wine. You've changed your approach, he said mildly. Adapt or die, she replied. I've died once already. He studied her for a moment, then raised his glass. To new beginnings, then. She mirrored him. To divine errors. They drank. He watched her over the rim of his glass. Why the sudden shift? Because I realized something, she said, tilting her head. You're too powerful to destroy from afar. If I want to break you, I must first become your crown. He chuckled. Honest. Dangerous. I've always liked that about you. She leaned in, lips nearly brushing the rim of her goblet. Don't mistake my proximity for submission, Tavros. I plan to kiss you with venom, sleep beside you with a dagger beneath my pillow, and love you the way a wolf loves the moon, howling, hungry, and destined to leave. For the first time, a crack appeared in his composure. But it was gone in a blink. Then I welcome the bite, Seris. Let's see who bleeds first. Later that night, she stood alone on her balcony, moonlight bathing her skin like a second skin. She raised her wrist, stared at the mark again. It pulsed. Alive. Watching. She whispered into the night, voice trembling with fury and grief. Marekth, if you don't come for me. She closed her eyes. Then I'll burn the gods myself. Chapter 10. The Bite Beneath the Veil. The moon hung high, pale and pitiless, watching over the temple where gods were mocked with silk and silver. Seris stood in the center of the ceremonial circle, her body adorned in the sacred wedding veil, the same one worn by the first moon-blessed queen, now repurposed for a bloodier legacy. The fabric shimmered like frost, but to Seris it felt like chains. Before her, Tavros knelt, hands raised, his fingers trembling with faux humility. His voice echoed through the towering pillars of the sanctum. Before the god who sealed time, I bind myself to you, Seris of the Moonblood. Vessel of Fate. Saint of the Wheel. Each title landed like a blow. Acolytes chanted in unison. The scent of burning myrrh filled the air. The spiral sigils along the temple walls glowed faintly, responding to the bond being forged, not of love, but of control. Seris bowed her head, lips parted, voice clear and sweet like venom-laced wine. I receive you, Tavros Morvain. I offer what fate gave me, my blood, my breath, my name. The final line burned her throat. It was done. The wheel had turned, again. Applause broke like thunder. Then silence. Footsteps. From the shadowed side of the sanctum, a figure emerged, tall, robed in hunter's gray, face obscured by a ceremonial hood. Nobles stiffened. Priests faltered in their steps. Seris didn't breathe. Until he stepped into moonlight. Marekth. He bowed low before the altar. For one tense moment, no one moved. Then, calmly, boldly, he reached for her hand. Her fingers curled into his without hesitation. He lifted her knuckles and pressed a kiss there. "Trust me," he whispered, his voice rough and low, meant only for her. "I'll get you out. Just wait." She held his gaze, the whisper of his mouth still burning her skin. Then she turned and kissed Tavros. Her lips met the high priest's in a perfect, rehearsed sweep, her posture flawless, her submission divine. The crowd exhaled in awe, but inside, she was fire. Because while his mouth touched hers, her mind whispered the ancient syllables Marekth had hidden inside the kiss. And she saw it then, behind her closed lids, the shimmer of a silver door in the ceremonial hall's western wing. The door of divine seals. Tavros had finally revealed its location. She only needed to survive long enough to open it. That night, the palace lay silent beneath layers of enchantment and sleep pollen. Most of the royal court had collapsed into stupor, drunk on sacred wine and divine spectacle. But not Seris. She stood in the queen's chamber alone, brushing the veil from her hair, fingers trembling, not from fear, but from something darker. Something she'd buried since her first death. Desire. Her body still remembered the press of Marekth's lips against her hand. His voice. The promise in it. Then, the balcony door creaked. He stepped in, silent as a shadow, his chest heaving slightly from the climb. They didn't speak. He crossed the room in 3 strides. She met him halfway. Their mouths met like a blade meeting its sheath, violent, inevitable, unfinished from lifetimes before. He kissed her like she was made of memory and fury. She kissed him like she could taste the night he didn't come for her. Her hands pulled him close, into the sanctuary that had never belonged to her. The queen's bed. Tavros's palace. But in this moment, it was their rebellion. "You kissed me in front of him," she breathed between gasps. "I wanted to mark you first," he growled. She bared her neck. "Then do it." He didn't need another invitation. They fell into each other, like sinners into sacrilege. Her hands clawed at his shoulders, her teeth found the space between neck and collarbone, and she bit. Blood welled. He grunted, not in pain, but in relief. "Again," he whispered. "No," she said against his skin, voice shaking. "Not unless you promise." His eyes opened, sharp and gold in the dark. "Promise what?" "That you'll never leave me to burn again." He stilled, breathing hard. "I swear," he rasped. "Next time, I'll set the pyre myself before I let them touch you." She kissed the oath from his mouth. Their clothes scattered like ghosts fleeing a curse. Every motion was a war, his control against her fury, her scars against his shame. They moved not like lovers, but like gods learning what it meant to hurt and be hurt, again and again. When they lay still, breathless and silent, moonlight carving pale paths across their bodies, Seris finally spoke. "I meant it," she murmured. "I'll destroy him." "I know," Marekth said, fingers brushing her shoulder where the veil had left faint bruises. "And I'll help you." "No," she said. "You'll follow me." He smiled faintly. "Always." Long after he drifted into sleep, she rose. Her body ached in all the ways she wanted it to. Her soul buzzed. Quietly, she crossed the room, pulling the cold tiles of the queen's bedchamber aside, where rumors said the last moon-blessed queen had hidden her heretic scrolls. There, beneath a loose stone, she found it. Cracked parchment. Divine ink. Half burned. Half preserved. The ritual of the wheel. A forbidden rite. She held it in shaking hands, heart thudding like war drums. If she completed it, the wheel of fate would break. She would become unmoored from Tavros, from prophecy, from even Marekth. She touched the curling edge of the page, voice soft in the silence. "If I destroy the god's design, if I unmake the fate that tied us." She looked back at him, bare, sleeping, unguarded. "Will you still love me when I'm no longer the girl you burned for?" Chapter 11. The Oath That Cuts. The moon hung low over the palace gardens, not the warm silver of blessing, but a pale blade poised over breathless silence. The Godseal garden, normally forbidden after dusk, was quiet but not empty. Its sacred blooms shimmered faintly under starlight, petals twitching at the scent of blood or betrayal. Seris stood among them, cloaked in sable, her veil gone, her lips painted in the soft sheen of defiance. Marekth approached without a sound, but she felt him before she saw him, the way the night stilled to watch, the way her own pulse betrayed her resolve. "You shouldn't have come," she said. "You summoned me," he replied. She didn't turn. "And you always obey, do you?" He strode forward, voice sharper than steel. "Not anymore." She faced him then, and for a moment, silence bloomed between them again, dangerous, soft, edged like thorned silk. "I know where the final key is," she said. Marekth's jaw tensed. "Where?" She touched her chest, right over her heart. "He buried it here. When I first woke from the rite. I thought it was the price of resurrection. But it was the anchor." His brows furrowed. "You let him cut into you." "I let him seal it in me," she corrected coldly. "I chose it." His voice thundered. "You chose him. I chose survival." The echo of her words seemed to startle even the moonlight. Petals fell like white ash to the ground. Marekth's shoulders stiffened. "You could have told me. You could have waited." "I did wait," she snapped. "For days. For weeks. For someone to come before the crown closed around my throat." His voice dropped. "I was fighting for the North. I was dying in the South," she shouted, the words ripping from her chest like blades. "You think you were the only one bleeding? You think I wanted to sleep beside the monster who branded my soul? Who used my body as a prophecy?" He stepped back. "Just once. Just enough." "That's what I've become," she whispered, trembling now. "A prophecy. Not a person." "You're still her," Marekth said. "Still the woman I—" "Don't," she warned. "I bled for you," he continued, voice rough. "I buried brothers for you. I damned my name. And I became a god's bride," she hissed. "So don't come here with your guilt and demand I be clean." He turned away, fists clenched. When he finally spoke, his voice cracked at the edges. "I would have burned down the heavens to get you back." Seris closed her eyes. "You didn't." That was when he tore the ring from his hand. The silver crest of his house hit the stone with a sound too final. "You think I love you because I want to watch you die again," he growled. "You think that's what this is?" She stepped forward, hand lifted, not to comfort, but to press two fingers to the place beneath his heart. "You will never die for me again," she whispered. A tremor passed through them both. Words shimmered in the air, blood-red and binding. "A vow." "I forbid it," she said. "Careful," he replied, eyes dark. "Oaths cut deeper than blades." "I know," she said. "That's why I made it." Behind them, a breath stirred the garden's edge. Elias emerged from the shadow of the moonshade trees, face pale, eyes gleaming like a blind man who saw too much. "Forgive me," he said softly, "but the storm you hoped to delay has already begun." Seris turned, composure returning like ice to fire. "What storm?" "The high priest has summoned the seraph host," Elias answered. "The Godblade Legion rides for Ashthorn." Marekth stiffened. 3 days, Elias continued. "And they'll be at your gates." "Why now?" Seris asked. Elias's blind eyes seemed to pierce straight through her soul. "Because he has declared the Saint Queen's soul is ready for fusing. You, Seris. He means to finish the rite. He means to wear you like a crown." She staggered back. "He, what?" Marekth caught her by the elbow. "We'll leave tonight. We'll get it out of you." "The seal." "No," she whispered. "Not yet." His voice rose. "Seris." She faced him, fierce and quiet. "I need to be near him. Just a little longer. He still believes I'm bending. If I leave now, he'll turn the rite on someone else, on a child, maybe. Or worse. He won't stop." Marekth's fingers tightened. "He'll consume you." Then I'll make sure I poison him when he swallows, she said. They stood in that trembling space again, him with his heart bleeding through his silence, her with her soul bound to an oath that hurt more than it healed. I still love you, he said finally, almost too soft. She smiled, bitter and bright. Then stay away. Let me finish what you started. He didn't answer. But she didn't need him to. She turned and disappeared into the bloom-choked shadows of the garden, each step a rebellion, each breath a prayer turned blade. 3 days. That was all the time the gods would allow. At dawn, the horns of the capital rang with divine decree. Tavros, high priest and voice of the moon, stood at the center of the palace's marble council, draped in celestial white, eyes burning with victory. I call upon the fate-bound, he announced, voice like polished obsidian. Let it be known to all houses and all heavens, 3 nights hence, the Saint Queen shall ascend. Her body shall become the vessel, her soul the seal. She shall be fate's final bride. No one spoke. No one dared. Seris stood behind him, veiled again, her wrists wrapped in ceremonial gold. Only the faintest twitch of her mouth betrayed her. Because she wasn't going to be anyone's bride. She was going to be the blade that shattered prophecy. And if fate dared take her again, this time she'd cut its throat. Chapter 12. The Dream That Wasn't Hers. The air within the Chapel of Fate was thick with silver incense, each curl of smoke a tether to realms unseen. The walls, etched with ancient sigils of the moon goddess, seemed to breathe with the slow pulse of divine magic, as if the stones themselves bore witness to the ritual about to begin. Seris knelt at the center of the ceremonial seal, barefooted, veiled in white so pale it could be mistaken for ash. Her wrists had been bathed in the sacramental oil of alignment. Her heart had been slowed by dreamroot. Her mind, soon to be unmoored. Tavros stood above her, dressed in ceremonial black. Begin the sanctification, he said. The high priestess whispered her chants. The altar stone beneath Seris warmed. Her lungs filled with fog, with light, with memory that wasn't hers. And she fell into the dream. It was gentle at first, almost cruelly so. A soft breeze carried the scent of rain-kissed soil. She stood in a field of wild lilacs, their petals brushing against her ankles. Somewhere a bell tolled, not the harsh clang of ritual summons, but a soft, celebratory chime. The sky was endless blue. A child ran toward her. Seris blinked. The child, barefoot, laughing, curls the color of dusk, threw herself into Seris's arms. You came back, the girl cried, clutching her tightly. I knew you would. Seris froze. Her hands trembled as they wrapped around the tiny body. Who? She whispered. You're my mother, the child said with absolute certainty. You're the moon. The dream I prayed for. The one who never leaves. Seris's breath caught. The landscape shifted with the ease of sleep logic. Now they were in a cottage nestled between trees, warm firelight flickering across the walls. A man's voice sang somewhere in the other room. She knew the tune. She didn't know how. She sat at a table, the child tugging on her sleeve, drawing constellations with sticky fingers and honeyed breadcrumbs. There were books stacked beside her, filled with names of stars, myths rewritten with her as the heroine. And still, her hands trembled. Because nothing hurt. Nothing ached. No blood. No chains. No gods. Tavros entered the room. He wore no robes here. No sigils. Only plain linen and a soft smile that didn't belong to him. You seem at peace, he said, pouring tea. Seris narrowed her eyes. This isn't real. Isn't it? He sat opposite her, voice low. You smiled. You laughed. I don't laugh, she said. But you did, he countered gently. And you will again. Stay. Let the world burn beyond these walls if it must. Here, you are the goddess of all you lost. The child clambered into her lap. Please don't go. You promised. Seris closed her eyes. Her breath shook. Tavros leaned closer. You don't have to fight anymore. You can be loved without pain, worshipped without sacrifice. She opened her eyes and whispered, "Why aren't you him?" The room didn't flinch, but her voice did. "You gave me everything I thought I wanted," she said, clutching the child to her. "But none of it smells like blood. None of it burns. And love always burns." Tavros exhaled through his nose, as if disappointed. "That's your trauma speaking. That's my truth." He reached across the table, brushing her cheek. She didn't recoil. "You could birth a new age," he said softly. "An age where no one like you would ever suffer again." "I don't want to birth anything," she hissed. "Not prophecy. Not peace. I only want—" Her voice broke. She saw it then, outside the window, beyond the illusion. Marekth, lying face down in a red pool that grew with every heartbeat. His blade beside him, fingers twitching toward her. "No." Seris shoved the chair back, the illusion flickering violently. The cottage shimmered, warping into cracked marble and black roots. The child screamed. "Mother, don't leave me again." She stumbled back. "You're not mine. None of this is mine." Tavros rose. "You'll regret this." "I already do." She reached for the pain, clawed at her skin, dug nails into her arm until red spilled across the white of her gown. The ground quaked. The child cried. The fire dimmed. "I revoke this dream," she shouted. Then she whispered the forbidden tongue, the moon's broken words. Fragments of a language older than gods. Astra, Lennar, Kadru. The world cracked. Light poured through the walls like truth. And Seris woke, gasping, sweating. Her body sprawled on the cold marble of the chapel floor. High priestesses whispered behind curtains. Tavros stood above her, arms folded, gaze unreadable. But her chest burned. She sat up, barely registering the attendants rushing to restrain her. Because between her breasts, etched into her skin, was a new mark. A glyph that pulsed with divine rhythm. The god seal. The fusion had begun. She touched it, trembling. It felt like ice under her skin. And something else, something wrong. She whispered, more to herself than anyone else, "I think I'm not me anymore." Tavros crouched beside her, stroking the edge of the brand. "No," he said, voice soft, victorious. "You are becoming." She looked up at him, eyes full of fire. "I will burn before I belong to you." He smiled, lips just a breath from hers. "We shall see." Chapter 13. The Wolf Left Behind. The wind howled across the northern ridges like a morning song. Snow slammed sideways against stone and steel, veiling the mountains in white fury. Marekth stood unmoving before the iron gates of the high keep of Ashvin, his cloak soaked through, armor stiff with cold. The elder banners above flapped, worn and gray, the old sigils of the moon barely visible beneath frost. They had refused him. The hall behind those gates, where once the blood of the old wolf kings flowed with pride, had turned its back. "She is lost," they had said. "She has been touched by divinity. She is no longer ours." Marekth had not spoken. Not when the priest elders shifted uncomfortably beneath his gaze. Not when they offered him ceremonial condolences instead of steel. Not even when the youngest among them, barely a man, whispered, "Let her be the martyr she was chosen to become." It was Raiden who finally dragged him out of that cursed chamber, jaw clenched so tight it looked like he might shatter his own teeth. Now, hours later, they stood at the blood-stained cliff known as the Wormfell, a place of ancient death, older than even the moon courts. The two of them faced the storm as if it were something living. "She wouldn't want you to kneel," Raiden said, arms crossed, breath steaming in the bitter air. Marekth didn't reply. His hands were bare, knuckles cracked and red. In them, he held a blade, old, rusted, ceremonial. It had once belonged to Seris. Raiden's eyes flicked to the weapon. "That's hers. From before." "I kept it," Marekth murmured. "Even after the pyres." The wind carried silence between them. Below, The valley stretched into a nothingness veiled by snow, the terrain unrecognizable save for the broken outline of the snow pine altar, where Seris had once knelt before a silver god and refused to bow. "You loved her in the last life too," Raiden said quietly. "Didn't you?" Marekth didn't answer. "Then why didn't you say it?" "I was too late," Marekth whispered. "By the time I knew what she was to me, she was already burning." He looked down at the blade in his hands. "I promised myself if she came back, if the world spun us one more chance, I'd speak before the pyres were lit." Raiden crouched beside him. "You're still too late." That stung, but Marekth didn't flinch. He rose, snow clinging to his knees, and began walking, past Raiden, past the jagged rocks, toward the remnants of the snow pine altar. The stone lay broken, split down the center. Old blood stained its cracks. No offerings had been made there in decades. He dropped to his knees. Blood met frost as he drove the edge of Seris's blade into his palm and let the red drip onto the altar. "I know you're watching," he said to the silver sky. "Or maybe not. Maybe you're deaf to the prayers of wolves." No answer. Only the wind. "I came to ask nothing for myself." His voice cracked. "But I ask you, no, I beg you, let her go. Let the mark fade. Let the god's seal wither. If your grip on her heart is vengeance, then take me instead." His blood steamed on the stone. "I was the one who left her behind in the last life. I was the one who stood at the gates and watched her burn. Don't punish her again for what I couldn't say." The cold began to bite deeper. Ice crawled up his sleeves, clinging to flesh. Raiden stood a short distance behind, watching. He didn't interrupt. Marekth bowed low, forehead touching the stone. He whispered a vow in the old tongue, not a soldier's promise, but a lover's. One carved from ruin. Above him, the clouds parted just enough to let moonlight through. In that thin blade of light, the snowflakes slowed. And for a breath, just one, he saw her. Seris's face shimmered in the cold air. Eyes wide, hair falling like rusted silk across her shoulders. Lips parted. She didn't speak, but the sorrow in her gaze was deafening. Marekth reached out, voice breaking. "Where are you, little flame? Which dream has trapped you this time?" The vision faded as fast as it came. Only the empty altar remained. He stayed there, crouched in blood and snow, breathing like a man drowning. After a time, Raiden came to his side and sat beside him. No words. Just two men, sitting in the absence of God and warmth. "You save everyone," Raiden said finally. "You always have. But this time," he looked Marekth in the eye. "Are you trying to save her, or are you just trying to save yourself from the guilt?" Marekth didn't answer. He couldn't. The truth was too bitter for speech. Raiden stood, brushing snow from his cloak. "You can't carry both her and the world, Marekth. Something's going to fall." "She doesn't need me," Marekth whispered. "No," Raiden agreed. "But maybe that's what scares you most." Marekth's fingers curled around the old blade. "This time," he said, "I won't bring armies. I won't bring banners. I'll bring the only thing I have left." "And what's that?" "Myself." Raiden nodded slowly, the kind of nod that meant understanding, not approval. "You ready to face her if she doesn't want saving?" Marekth stood at last. His eyes, frostbitten and silver bright, fixed on the horizon. "If she's the sword, then let me be the hand that bleeds to hold her." Behind them, the wind shifted. Ahead, the road led south, back to the city, back to the woman who might no longer be waiting. Chapter 14: The Marriage That Bled. The bells tolled with hollow grandeur, the sound sharp as the blade of a guillotine slicing through a hush that gripped the capital. Each peal echoed across the spires of the city, calling nobles, priests, and the faithful alike to witness a union that was not born of love, but prophecy. The sky above the Grand Fate Temple churned with stormlight, a cruel mockery of the celebration unfolding below. Silk banners embroidered with the sigils of the moon and sun flapped in the windless air, manipulated by magic, not breeze. The great square was filled with silent onlookers, Lords in jeweled robes, high priestesses cloaked in obsidian veils, soldiers of the god blood guard standing like statues. Seris stood at the center of it all, veiled in silver, motionless upon the marble altar known as the Sky Altar. The gown they had put her in shimmered like woven starlight, threaded with celestial glyphs, tied across her chest and throat like a noose disguised as beauty. Her hands were bound in golden chains, ceremonial but no less real. Opposite her stood Tavros. He wore no crown, only the markings of the High Scion, black and crimson robes, bare arms inked with the shifting glyphs of fate. His expression was calm, unreadable, like the silence before the world ends. "You look divine," he murmured, his voice low enough for only her ears. "Tragedy suits you. The blood you wear becomes your crown." Seris said nothing. Her lips were numb. Her bones felt like ice pressed beneath stone. Every part of her was screaming to run, but her feet held. The priestess began the chant, ancient and cold. The words spiraled into the air like chains made of language. Around them, the temple responded, columns humming, stars dimming. Tavros lifted the ceremonial dagger. "You must give your blood," the priestess said. "Of your own will." 1,000 eyes watched her. Nobles leaned forward. Courtiers held their breath. Somewhere among them, Lyaran stood stiff, a puppet prince, his eyes glazed. And above, on the highest tier of the temple, where only the high priests were permitted, she saw him. Marekth. He was disguised in the ivory robes of a fate warden, hood pulled low, but nothing could mask the way he stood, like a storm coiled into human shape. Their eyes met. Just for a second. And her heart broke. Marekth shook his head, subtly, pleading. She felt his soul reaching for her, roaring in her mind, in the mate bond that pulsed faint and frayed through her veins. But he was too late. Tavros saw the flicker in her eyes. He leaned in, lips brushing her ear. "He always arrives too late, doesn't he? That's what makes him tragic. That's why he'll lose." Seris trembled. The dagger in Tavros's hand gleamed. "Say the words," the priestess commanded. "Or he dies." She understood. Tavros had woven traps upon traps. If she refused, Marekth would reveal himself. The guards would strike. The god-blood army would fall upon him like locusts. So she did what no creature ever should. She bent her head and bit through her own wrist. Her teeth cracked bone. Blood burst forth, glowing, gold, not red. It spilled onto the altar and hissed against the ancient stone. The square erupted in gasps. The altar flared, symbols igniting. Above them, the sky cracked, thin ribbons of light curling open like slits in the firmament. The door to the fate core was opening. But Seris wasn't done. She clenched her jaw against the pain, raised her bleeding arm toward the highest tier, and spoke words in a forgotten tongue, each syllable laced with agony. A shield flared into being, white-hot, and spiraled with blood glyphs, slamming down between Marekth and the altar. "No," he roared, striking the barrier with both fists. "Seris!" Her knees gave out, but she didn't fall. Tavros caught her by the waist, like a lover would. She did not look at him. Her eyes stayed locked on Marektha's. "I can't let you save me," she whispered, though he could not hear her. He slammed his fists again, the magic crackling in protest. "Let me through, gods damn you, let me through." "You would burn," she mouthed, tears spilling now freely. "I am already the curse." Tavros's voice slithered against her spine. "And now, you're mine. The fate goddess's vessel. The bride of prophecy." She did not resist as he drew the blood from her wound with his fingers and painted it across her brow like a benediction. The marriage was sealed. The nobles applauded. The priests bowed. The stars dimmed again, closing their eyes to what they had witnessed. Marekth stood behind the barrier, breathing like a beast caged too long. His hood had fallen. His disguise shattered. But no one dared approach him. Because the look in his eyes was not madness. It was war. Seris swayed, barely upright. Her heart stuttered. Her body frayed. And then she saw it, in the pool of blood at her feet, her reflection. But the eyes were not hers. They glowed. Not with light, but with motion. Inside her irises, fate spun. Threads unraveled and reknit. Stars died and reformed. She gasped. Her hands trembled. "What have you done?" she whispered. Tavros smiled. "Turned you into what you were always meant to become." Chapter 15. The Shattered Seal. The walls of the Fate Core pulsed like the ribs of a dying god. Seris lay on the cold crystal floor of the inner sanctum, her breath shallow, her body shivering not from cold, but from a strange, creeping numbness that stole more than sensation. She could no longer feel her fingers. Her legs had gone stiff. Her eyes, once sharp and fire-bright, now clouded with slivers of silver mist. She was losing herself. Not dying. Not quite. Becoming. The chamber was round, domed, and alive. Veins of light ran across the ceiling like constellations trapped beneath skin. Glyphs shimmered on every surface old as time, muttering truths in languages even gods had forgotten. At the center, above her heart, the god seal pulsed. A brand burned into her flesh. It whispered promises, twisted prophecy, and with every throb, something slipped out of her memory, names, faces, smells. What was her name again? She closed her eyes. Seris. A pause. Yes, that was still hers. The echo of footsteps approached. No, not real. Not yet. Illusions had crept into the air like fog through broken windows. Time no longer moved forward. It spiraled. She saw herself on her knees at the wedding altar. Then a child calling her mother. Then Marekth's hand reaching, always just out of reach. It looped, cracked, reversed, repeated, and then the voice. "You could have had it all, you know." She turned. Tavros stood beside her, untouched by dust or time. His robes shimmered with threads of constellations, his eyes no longer human. They gleamed with moonlight, cruel and soft at once. He did not walk, he existed, gently inserted into the space, like a dream you couldn't unsee. "You're not really here," she rasped. "You're part of the seal." "I am the seal," he said calmly. "And the gate. And the god behind it." His hand reached toward her face. She didn't flinch, only glared. He cupped her cheek like a lover would, thumb brushing the sharpness of her cheekbone. "I asked the fates to give me a vessel," Tavros whispered. "They gave me you. A shell that bled beauty and rage. But you fight it still. You speak of fate," she said, like it was ever yours to command. "You misunderstand," he replied. "I don't command fate. I am what happens when fate breaks." Somewhere beyond the chamber, walls trembled. A boom resounded, followed by the clash of steel. Marekth had come. He and Elias had carved a path through the lower halls of the Moonspine Keep, their blades wet with the blood of god-blood sentinels. The deeper they went, the more the palace twisted, reality folding on itself, corridors looping, time resisting. Elias had warned him. "We're already inside the mental labyrinth," he whispered. "This place doesn't obey laws." "I don't need laws," Marekth growled. "I need her." And now, in the spiral staircase of the Fate Tower, they had found the final gate, a shimmering barrier of starlight and bone silver, pulsing like a heartbeat. Tavros awaited him there. Or the ghost of him, layered in illusions, sharpened with memories not his own. "Marekth of the Northern Blood," Tavros said from within the veil, his voice deep with ancient echo, "you shouldn't be here." Marekth's sword gleamed with runes. "You shouldn't be alive." "I'm not," Tavros answered. "I was chosen. Then discarded. Like you." "But the gods forget. Abandoned wolves bite back." Marekth's teeth bared. "She doesn't love you." "She doesn't have to. She will become me." The barrier split. And they collided, mind against mind, spirit against spirit. They did not clash swords. They clashed selves. Tavros pulled Marekth into the mirrored plane, a reflection of the moon where thoughts bled. Every memory Marekth had ever buried rose up: his father's death, the night Seris burned, the first time he saw her and knew she would ruin him. Tavros tore through his mind, not to destroy, but to rewrite. She doesn't need saving, Tavros hissed. She needs purpose. Marekth bled from the eyes, the mouth, the soul. But he screamed back, then why does she still cry your name in pain? Tavros faltered. Just for a breath. And in that breath, Marekth found her. Through the crumbling barrier, through layers of light and illusion, there she was. Seris. On her knees, body trembling, veins glowing. Her eyes were clouded. But she saw him. They reached for each other. Fingers did not touch. But souls did. I'm not here to save you, Marekth said, voice shaking. I know. I came to die with you. Seris smiled through the blood on her lips. And whispered, no. You came to watch me kill a god. She raised her hand. The brand on her chest cracked. The god seal howled. Tavros screamed, not in fear, but in fury, like a beast denied its throne. No, he thundered. You can't, there is no you without me. I know, Seris said softly. If I die. You don't die, she whispered. You shatter. She clenched her fist, and the seal broke. Like glass struck from within, the sigil on her chest exploded outward, splintering light and command and prophecy. The core of the world cracked. The ceiling above the Fate Tower ruptured, and the moon screamed. Reality split. The threads of destiny unraveled. And in the middle of the chaos, Seris stood. Her body steaming, cracked and bleeding, eyes glowing with something no longer mortal. Elias stumbled into the chamber behind Marekth. His breath caught. She broke the god seal, he whispered. She broke Tavros. No, Marekth said, a tear sliding down his cheek. She chose to break everything. Seris turned to them. I'm not finished, she said. And the tower began to collapse. Chapter 16, The Moon That Split in Half. The world bled silver. Where once the Fate Tower had stood, glorious and inviolable, the seat of prophecy and divine authority, there now lay only broken marble, shattered sigils, and the dust of gods. Smoke rose from the crater, curling like fingers clawing the air. And at its heart, where the seal had shattered and the moonlight had screamed, stood Seris. She was no longer a woman. No longer merely flesh. No longer only herself. Her hair floated weightless in the dead air, tangled with shimmering threads of starlight. Her skin, pale as moon bone, pulsed with lines of gold and void, cracks glowing like magma beneath the surface. Her eyes were twin eclipses, one silver, one void black, ringed with divine glyphs spinning like halos. Around her, every blade of grass had withered. The birds had dropped from the sky mid-flight. Every soldier within a mile had either fled screaming or fallen where they stood, eyes wide with awe or terror. And Marekth, bloodied, limping, burnt from the collapse, walked toward her through the ruin. Seris, he whispered, voice hoarse. Seris, it's me. She did not move. He knelt before her, not in reverence, but in heartbreak. Her gaze flicked over him without recognition. As though he were fog. As though he had never mattered at all. The realization sliced through him more cleanly than any blade. He gritted his teeth, reached into the pouch at his waist, and pulled out the silver dagger he had once used to cut a blood oath beneath the moon tree, the night he first swore to protect her. Without hesitation, he drew it across his palm. Blood welled, hot and thick, and he pressed the wound against her hand. You remember this, he said. You bled for me first. Nothing. Seris, please. The gods took everything from us. Don't let them have you. Still she did not speak. But something flickered in her fingers. The faintest tremor. Behind them, the rubble shifted. Tavros stepped from the shadows, robes torn but his presence undiminished. If anything, he seemed cleaner now, reborn in the wreckage of the divine. The markings along his spine glowed, as though the breaking of the god seal had unlocked something in him as well. Marekth rose, fury flaring like a second sun. "You," he growled. Tavros raised both hands in mock surrender. "Not here to fight." "I don't believe you." "Good. That means you're still sane," Tavros said smoothly, his gaze shifting toward Seris. "But you're also wrong. She's not yours." "She's not yours either." Marekth moved to stand between them, his voice low and trembling with rage. "Say what you came to say before I tear your throat out." Tavros looked him in the eye, unflinching. "She's not anyone's anymore. Not even her own." The words hit like a truth Marekth didn't want to believe, but couldn't deny. He looked back at Seris, standing in the center of death and silence, her lips parted as though hearing something far away. "I can help bring her back," Tavros said. Marekth snarled. "You poisoned her mind, twisted her, made her break the seal." "And she did it of her own will," Tavros snapped. "She always had the power to say no." "She didn't." "You think love is enough to keep her human? It isn't. She chose this path. She chose it to stop you." "She chose it," Tavros repeated, softer now, "because she's always been more than what you allowed her to be." The words twisted like a blade in Marekth's gut. Tavros stepped closer. "The god seal is gone. But its shards remain, scattered like embers. The god-blooded, those remnants of the priestly caste, have already begun to collect them. They believe they can rebuild what was lost." Marekth's eyes narrowed. "You mean enslave her again?" "They mean to finish what I began," Tavros said, with a rare note of bitterness. "But she won't survive another attempt. Not as herself. The more they feed her the fragments, the more the god inside her will overwrite what's left of Seris." Marekth turned fully toward him. "Then why are you telling me this?" Tavros's voice was quieter than it had ever been. "Because you're the only one she ever let touch her soul." There was no arrogance in his tone. "Only regret." "You want to help her," Tavros said. "So do I." A silence fell between them, thick with shared ruin. Seris moved. Barely. Her foot slid forward through ash. Her head tilted as if listening. But not to them. To something deeper. "I hear the voice of fate," she murmured. "It sings in broken stars. It calls me daughter." Marekth stepped toward her again. "What about me? Do you remember my voice?" She blinked slowly. "I hear your shape," she said. That crushed him in ways he hadn't thought possible. "She can't feel temperature," Tavros added quietly. "Can't feel pain. Or touch. Her nervous system is being rewritten. She's becoming a vessel of pure function." "And you're fine with that?" Marekth spat. "No," Tavros said. "I'm afraid of it." For once. Lightning struck in the distance. Not from the sky, but from the earth. Cracks tore across the ruins of the city, and Marekth saw them, figures crawling from the ash, their eyes glowing with the residue of shattered prophecy. "Reborn," he muttered. "They survived." "Worse," Tavros said. "They're hungry." Elias appeared from behind a broken spire, sword drawn, face bloodied. "They've found the largest shard," he reported. "It's being taken to the old Star Lake ruins. If they reach the mirror gate with it, they'll make her a god without will," Tavros finished. "A statue with breath." Marekth turned back to Seris. She had knelt, hands in the ash. Her fingers traced a shape, a moon. But it was split in half. A child's drawing. Trembling. "I don't want to be alone anymore," she whispered. Marekth dropped beside her, not touching, just being there. "You're not," he said. "Your warmth," she said, "I remember it. But I can't feel it." He broke then. A single tear fell onto her hand. She looked at it, fascinated. Watched it bead, then vanish. "I want to remember what love tastes like." "You will," he said. "I'll give it to you again. Every hour. Every breath." She looked at him, and in that one flicker, she was Seris again. Then it was gone. But it was enough. Tavros spoke again. "We have one chance. If we reach the mirror gate first, if we gather the right shards, she might still choose humanity." Marekth rose. "Then let's go." Tavros nodded once. For her. Elias glanced between the two of them, then sighed. Goddess, help us. No, Marekth said. Only she can help us now. Far behind them, the split moon began to eclipse again. But Seris still knelt, whispering, in my dreams, there was fire, but also a hand. It wasn't yours, Marekth. And in the silence of her fading thoughts, Tavros's shadow stretched toward her like a vow never forgotten. Chapter 17, The Pact of the Dead. The air smelled of ash and roses, of things that had once lived, once bloomed, once burned. Seris stood before the shattered altar beneath a blood-red sky, her feet bare on fractured stone, the weight of 1,000 memories pressing into her bones like frostbite. The ruins stretched in every direction, lit by the flickering glow of spirit fire. This was not the world. This was beneath it, between the dream and the grave. She was not alone. Tavros stood a short distance away, his cloak trailing mist, his eyes too calm. The dead corridor is awakening, he said, voice like velvet on glass. It only opens for those who have died once already. Seris did not look at him. And for those who made others die? He did not flinch. I built this corridor to offer you a choice. You should thank me. I'd rather bite my tongue and choke on it. Poetic, Tavros murmured. But unnecessary. You won't be alone in there. Marekth appeared from behind her, silent as a forgotten oath. His hand grazed her shoulder, not in comfort, but grounding. Real. Mortal. I'll wait at the threshold, he said, voice low. You already did, she whispered. Too long. She stepped forward. The world shifted. The altar cracked open, revealing a staircase spiraling into shadow. The moment her foot touched the first step, whispers crawled up her spine, names she didn't recognize and one she did. Seris. But not her voice. Not from this life. She descended. The dead corridor was carved of petrified bone, each rib like arch flickering with the glow of soul lanterns. Veils of black silk drifted in the still air, pulled by no wind. And behind each veil, faces. Flickering. Watching. Then, herself. A mirror of moonlight stepped from the veil, barefoot, cloaked in silver, her hair braided with bone beads, eyes calm with sacrifice. Past Seris looked at her and spoke with quiet finality. You already chose this, remember? Seris's breath caught. I don't remember choosing to die. You didn't choose death, her past self said. You chose peace. For them. The corridor shimmered. And Seris saw it. A memory not her own, but hers. Her body in ceremonial white, chained to a pyre made of sacred ashwood. The moon burning above. The priests chanting. And there, kneeling in the crowd, held back by guards, Marekth. Younger. Bloodied. Screaming her name until his throat tore. He reached for her until they broke his arm. And she never looked down. He thought she couldn't hear him. But now she did. Why? Seris whispered. Her past self stepped closer. Because I believed in fate. In sacrifice. In gods who demand it. Then you were a coward. No, the ghost said softly. I was tired. The corridor darkened. The veils fell. Another figure emerged. Marekth. But not the one she knew. This one was younger, desperate. He walked with a limp, holding a blood-stained scroll. He looked at her and said, I signed it. Seris froze. I begged the gods, the past Marekth said. Not to save you. I knew that price was too high. I begged them to let me stay close to you. To watch over you in the next life. Even if I could never stop your death. Her heart twisted. I signed the pact, he said again. And the price was clear. I would never be your savior. Only your shadow. The two ghosts faded. The corridor pulsed. A scroll unfurled in the air before her, written in starlight and blood. The divine contract. Tavros's voice echoed from the ceiling. It is your right to cut the cord. To end your link to godblood. To forget divinity. To live as a woman, and not as the key. Marekth's real voice, distant now, Seris. If you want peace, take it. She stared at the scroll. The quill floated in front of her. Her hand did not move. Then, softly, she said, "No." The entire corridor shook. "I won't cut the cord," she said, louder now. "Because I'm not the girl who knelt at a pyre. I'm not the god's vessel, nor your puppet, Tavros. And I am not your regret, Marekth." She stepped back from the contract. "I'm the one who died and came back to end this cycle." The scroll ignited into white fire. The corridor cracked. The veils screamed. Then, darkness. When she opened her eyes, she was lying in the ashes of the broken altar, Marekth kneeling beside her, brushing soot from her cheek. "You didn't sign it," he whispered. She turned her head. "Would it have made you feel better if I did?" He smiled bitterly. "Only if you were happy." "Happy," she echoed, "is for those who still believe in futures." Tavros approached, stepping over bones like they were petals. "You do realize what this means." "I'll keep unraveling," she said. "The god inside me will wake and consume me. Unless," he offered smoothly, "you bind it again. Accept your place. Become the moon's will." Seris sat up slowly, her bones aching. Her skin glowed faintly. "Did I ever win?" she asked. "In any life?" Tavros looked amused. "You never had the luxury of victory." Marekth spoke then, voice like stone cracking. "I live for one thing." They both turned to him. "I live for the day you forgive me for dying too slow." Seris blinked. Then she said, not cruelly but coldly, "It wasn't that you died too slow. It's that I forgave fate too fast." She stood. The world tilted. Her body, her edges, were fading. Where her fingertips touched her skin, they shimmered. Transparent. Time was beginning to eat her. She looked down. "I'm disappearing." "Yes," Tavros confirmed. "Unless I bind myself again." "Yes." She turned away. "Then I will disappear. As me. Not your god. Not your memory." Marekth reached for her, but she was already walking toward the horizon, her steps scattering silver motes behind her. Not gone. Not yet. But vanishing. And somewhere in the ashes of the broken pact, the gods stirred. Chapter 18, The Air That Shouldn't Exist. It smelled of blood. Not fresh, not spilled from violence, but old, stale, preserved in sacred glass and sealed behind sigils only the gods remembered. The hallway spiraled downward beneath the ruins of the broken throne, into the marrow of the earth itself, where no wind stirred and time moved wrong. Seris walked in silence. Tavros led the way, his white robes untouched by dust, hands clasped as if in prayer. "It's better you see it with your own eyes." Marekth walked behind her, close enough for his presence to anchor, far enough for his anger to coil in silence. Elias remained at the threshold of the stairway, watching them vanish into what had once been the heart of fate, now repurposed into a chamber of impossible truths. As they descended, golden veins pulsed in the obsidian walls, casting an eerie heartbeat. Seris's hand brushed the stone. Warm. Alive. Listening. "Where are we going?" she asked, her voice barely holding. "To meet your legacy," Tavros said. "To meet the part of you that was never meant to suffer." She stopped walking. Tavros didn't. The door at the base of the spiral opened with a sigh of breathless eternity. And inside was her. Or something like her. The girl stood in a chamber of silver light, suspended in a cradle of luminous veins. Pale skin kissed with the faintest crescent birthmark at the base of her throat. Silver hair falling in the same ripple as Seris's had once done. But her eyes, those were blank. Vast. Like memory before it found words. Tavros turned to her with a softness that chilled the bone. "Her name is Ione," he said. "Born of your god blood, shaped with precision, matured through accelerated soul imprinting." Seris stared, rooted in place. "She looks like me." "She is you," Tavros replied, "without the pain. Without the scars. I harvested the essence of your divine womb, what remained after the fusion, and filtered the trauma. She carries your strength. But none of your weakness." "That's not," her voice broke. Marekth stepped forward. You bred her? No, Tavros said calmly. I freed her. I took the parts of Seris too burdened to breathe and gave them a new vessel. She remembers your favorite lullaby, Seris. The one you sang in the void. She dreams of snowfields and forgets why they make her ache. Stop talking, Seris hissed. Tavros only smiled. She will never be asked to bleed for others. Never have to choose between gods and wolves. She will walk where you broke. Speak where you were silenced. Love where you feared. Seris stumbled back, mouth dry. I didn't agree to this, she whispered. You didn't have to. You begged for it every time you looked at the sky and asked for a second chance. Her knees buckled. Marekth caught her. But the worst hadn't come. Tavros pressed a hand to the cradle's sigil. Ion's eyes opened slowly, voidless, like fresh snow, and she smiled. Seris's smile, from before the curses. Before the fire. Before memory sharpened into guilt. Hello, Ion said softly. Are you my mother? Seris's lips parted, but no sound emerged. I dreamed of you, the girl continued. I saw you cry in a room full of light. I wanted to hold your hand. Seris turned, shoving herself out of Marektha's grip. She walked blindly to the far corner of the chamber, and when her back hit the cold wall, she slid down until her body folded in on itself. Her breath came sharp. Her chest trembled. And she broke. I didn't ask for this, she sobbed. I never wanted to be a mother to a ghost. Marekth was beside her in a heartbeat. He didn't touch her. Not yet. Tavros stepped closer to Ion, brushing a hand through the girl's hair. She will never suffer. She will be loved correctly. Isn't that what you wanted, Seris? Why do you mourn a salvation you gave yourself? Seris looked up at him, eyes rimmed in red. That's not me, she snarled. That's a hollow of stolen dreams. Tavros's expression never faltered. Is she not proof that the world can be different? Marektha's voice cut through the light like a blade. You think we loved her because of how she looked? What she remembered? We loved her because she kept standing after the gods tried to grind her into dust. He turned to Ion, not with hatred, but pity. I don't love you, he said, calm and cruel. Not because you're her. But because you're not. Ion blinked slowly. Then who will love me? No one, Seris said, standing now, legs shaking. Because you're not supposed to exist. She pointed at Tavros. You didn't save me. You replicated me. That's not compassion. That's erasure. Tavros's mouth curled. Then perhaps you should not have broken so beautifully. She slapped him. The sound echoed like thunder in the sacred chamber. Tavros did not retaliate. He only turned his face slowly back to her and said, if she could give you a new life, why won't you take it? Seris stared at him, eyes wild. Because I earned every scar, every scream, every broken piece. And if I don't carry them, no one will remember who I am. She turned back to Marekth. I'm not strong, she whispered. I know. I cried in front of her, she said. She asked me if I was her mother. And all I wanted to say was no. I am the girl who should have died. You didn't, Marekth said. And I think whatever gods still rot in the sky that you didn't. She shook in his arms. And then, finally, reached for him. He cradled her as if she were flame. Tavros exhaled. You're making this harder than it has to be. Seris's face turned to stone. I'll make it impossible. Tavros tilted his head. You know the truth now. You've seen the cost. What will you do? Seris stood, straightened her spine. The tears dried on her cheeks, leaving behind something colder. Stronger. If I fail again, she said, voice steady, if the world breaks a second time, I'll give you what you want. Tavros's eyes narrowed. Which is? You can have me, she said. Not as your bride. Not as your god. But as your weapon. I'll tear open the sky, bury the traitors, and offer my heart to the altar. Marekth went still. Seris turned her head slightly, not looking at him. But until that day, she continued, I remain me. The broken one. The scarred one. The girl who stood where gods feared to kneel. Ion tilted her head. Then what am I? She asked. Seris looked her in the eyes. A reminder, she said softly, of what I'll never become. Chapter 19, The Night Without Moonlight. The sky above the Forbidden Range was thick with cloud and ash, smothering starlight like a dying breath. No moon. No wind. Only silence heavy enough to crack bone. Seris stood at the edge of the chasm known as the Lightless Maw, where gods had once fallen and never risen. The wind here didn't howl, it listened. The rock was sharp, jagged like the ribs of a long-dead titan. The earth pulsed faintly beneath her boots, the heartbeat of something ancient and dying beneath. Behind her, Marekth's presence was a low flame, steady but exhausted. Tavros was already descending the fractured stairway that spiraled toward the pit's black center, his pale cloak untouched by dust, his steps unhurried, as if even death couldn't stain him. They buried the old gods here, Seris murmured, her voice nearly lost in the pressure of the void. And now we stand on their bones, asking for power they once burned the world to hide. No, Tavros called back without looking over his shoulder. We're not asking. We're taking it back. She followed him downward, Marekth at her side. The steps led to the base of the ravine where twisted remnants of godbone jutted from the stone like fossilized wings, and the remains of a shattered altar waited, dead for centuries, but still aching with a hunger older than light. The Death Seer's throne, once used to siphon divine essence, now nothing but a graveyard's whisper. Seris knelt, running her fingers along the cracked marble veins. We need to reactivate it, she said. With god blood. I brought yours, Tavros replied, tossing her a sealed vial, her blood, drawn during the last rites after the wedding. But it isn't enough. The core requires loss. Will. A god's pain. I'll do it, Marekth said simply. Seris turned sharply. No. He didn't argue. He simply stepped forward and began removing his gloves, revealing the old scars across his palms, memories of oaths, broken and kept alike. I said no, she snapped. We don't know what this will take. It might kill you. He looked at her with a calm that was more terrifying than madness. Then let it. Tavros's voice was cool as frost. It's not enough. It must be a wound chosen by her. The altar responds to the weight of divine betrayal. She has to kill you. The words echoed. Seris froze. Marekth didn't. He turned, slowly, toward Tavros. You knew this would be the cost. I crafted this altar, Tavros said. Every seal on it is bound to fate and blood. If you are her tether to mortality, then severing you will complete the core. No, Seris said. No. I won't. She already died once, Marekth interrupted quietly. Because you let her believe there was no other choice. Seris walked backward, breathing hard, as the altar began to thrum beneath her feet. This isn't the answer. This is just another leash. She doesn't need your protection, Tavros said. She needs absolution. Enough. Marekth's voice rang like iron. Then, softly, to Seris, you don't have to choose this. I'm not going to kill you, she said. I know, he murmured. And then, he drew his blade. It was silent, clean, efficient. A half-circle arc. He drove the tip into his own chest, through the seal beneath his collarbone that bore her name in the old tongue, burned into him since the fire. Blood blossomed like a prayer denied. Seris screamed. He collapsed against the altar as it flared to life, drinking the blood, veins of crimson racing through its veins like fire waking from 1,000-year slumber. Tavros knelt beside Marekth, inspecting the wound like one would inspect a relic. It's enough, he said. Don't you touch him. Seris lunged. But the moment her hand touched Marekth's blood, the altar reacted. A pulse shot through the stone, and her body arched, air stolen from her lungs as the divine connection awakened, a god recognizing its mirror. The power roared into her bloodstream, into her bones, into her eyes. And then, everything went still. Marekth, on his knees, smiled weakly at her. I wanted to give you a second choice, he rasped. Not because I think you'll choose me, but because I want you to want to live. She dropped to her knees beside him, gathering him close, his blood soaking her sleeves. "You always do this," she choked. "You always hurt yourself and call it love." He blinked slowly. "You never let me love you any other way. And you never ask me how I want to live." He coughed, a soft, bitter laugh. "Because I'm afraid you'll say it doesn't matter." She kissed him. Fierce. Shaking. Like something desperate to rewrite death. The altar lit around them, sacred runes flickering, and for a moment it looked like time hesitated, unsure if it should proceed. When the kiss broke, Seris leaned her forehead to his. "I'm not the same girl anymore. I don't want to die. And I don't want you to save me with your death." He whispered, too late. She gripped his hand and felt the bond flare. Her divine essence, once wild, once breaking her from within, now surged into him. A fragment of her remembered self, pouring back into his veins. He gasped as light burned through him, sealing the wound, forging a new mark just above his heart, her sigil, the shape of a broken moon. "You idiot," she said through tears. "I wasn't supposed to have to choose between you and power." "You never had to," he said, eyes closing. But she didn't let go. Tavros watched silently. He said nothing. For once, no offer. No bargain. Just silence, heavy and waiting. Seris turned slowly. "You knew this would break me." Tavros didn't deny it. "I needed to see what you would do. If you'd let him die for you. If you'd become the kind of god that doesn't flinch." She stood, trembling with fury. "Then watch closely. I will become a god who remembers. Who doesn't burn her past just to light the future." But her body gave out. The divine backlash surged as Marekth's wound closed. Her breath caught in her throat. Her knees buckled. "Seris," Marekth said, catching her as her eyes rolled back. A last whisper left her lips before the world faded. "Your blood has my name in it. You don't get to die without me." And then darkness claimed her, no stars, no moonlight. Only his arms holding her as the sky remained stubbornly, unforgivably black. Chapter 20. The Crown She Didn't Want. The sky above the ruined halls of the former Fate Sanctum was cracked open like an egg spilled onto the void. Pale fire spilled from the wound in the heavens, streaking across a horizon that no longer obeyed time. Below, the shattered bones of the temple lay like the ribcage of a god long devoured by silence. Seris stood at the center of the Judgment Ring, a massive circle carved into obsidian and inlaid with moonlight script, once a place of prophecy, now a place of ultimatum. Around her stood the last of the Divine Council, robed figures who had outlived empires, faces cloaked in gold-threaded veils, voices more echo than sound. At her feet lay the twin offerings. To her left, Marekth, bound by silver root chains, though blood still stained his chest where the wound had closed days ago. His eyes were open, watching her, steady and quiet, even as the cold from the stone seeped into his bones. To her right, Tavros, kneeling of his own volition, arms folded, head bowed in what might have been reverence or manipulation. Seris's voice trembled as she finally broke the silence. "What happens if I don't choose?" A voice older than sky answered from the veil of the gods. "Then the seal fractures. The balance breaks. Chaos consumes the 9 realms. And if I choose one, you become the god king of fate. The world continues. But one must be sacrificed to anchor your rule." It was a prison disguised as divinity. She had known it. She had felt it since the moment the god blood burned into her veins. But now they wanted her to decide who to lose. Marekth didn't speak. He simply looked at her the way he always did, not as a savior, not as a symbol. As Seris. Tavros lifted his head. "You know the correct choice. It's always been me. I was made for this. I've already given up my soul, what's left of it is yours." Seris clenched her hands. Ion appeared behind her, a shimmer of starlight, not quite corporeal. The echo of the daughter she never had, the future self she could never be. The clone Tavros had birthed to replace her, and somehow, still, an echo of something inside her. "You can't love and rule," Ione said softly, her voice nearly human. "If you want to be Queen of Fate, you must leave your heart behind." "I never wanted to be a queen," Seris whispered. "I only ever wanted to be free." "You don't get both," Tavros said. He stood, the first to break the ceremonial stillness. "You are the last bridge," he said, walking toward her. "Between what this world was and what it must become. I'm offering you the chance to save everyone. Do not let your attachment to him turn into a funeral pyre for a world already broken." Seris looked at Marekth. He didn't move, didn't speak, but his eyes said everything. He would let her choose. He wouldn't fight. He wouldn't beg. He trusted her. And somehow, that was more unbearable than all the pleading in the world. "Say something," she rasped. Marekth did. "You already know what you're going to do. I just want you to live with it." A sob threatened to tear her throat apart. She could have screamed, cried, run. Instead, she lifted her hand. The god blade answered her touch, a length of cold white fire forged from her own blood and the broken moon. It hissed into her palm, hungry for purpose, for ending. The council chanted. The ring began to glow. "Choose," the voice of the gods thundered. Tavros stepped forward, half smiling. "I'm ready." Marekth remained kneeling. "And Seris." Seris screamed. The blade swung wide and struck the center of the ring. Not Marekth. Not Tavros. The altar. The very seal that demanded her obedience. The ground cracked. Light burst from the shattered core, blinding, wild, and uncontainable. "You think I'm your weapon," she shouted to the sky, to the gods, to Tavros, to Marekth, to herself. "You think I have to choose between love and survival, between being whole and being powerful. You are all wrong." She turned to the gods, her voice now ringing with divine resonance. "I will not inherit this world." She lifted the blade again. "I will rebuild it." Tavros stepped back, real horror in his eyes for the first time. "You can't destroy the ring," he said. "Without it, there is no order. There is no balance. There's no freedom with it either." She drove the blade into the core. The explosion didn't come with fire. It came with silence. A ringing, divine quiet. Then the quake. The entire temple began to collapse inward. Light split the sky above as if the stars themselves were falling. Tavros fell to his knees, his scream lost in the roar of unraveling fate. Marekth ran toward her, breaking the chains like smoke. He caught her just as she faltered, the backlash of godhood bleeding out of her. She slumped into him, her forehead pressed to his. "You've doomed us," he said, voice hoarse. "I know," she whispered. "I should hate you for it. I know. But I don't. I know." They stood together as the stars cracked open and the sky rained down shards of fate. Behind them, Ione burned into stardust, her smile peaceful. Above them, the gods screamed. "And Seris?" Seris looked up at the crown of light forming in the air above her. She did not reach for it. She turned away, because she was not the Queen of Fate. She was its end. Chapter 21: The God Who Learned to Cry. The trial did not begin with fire. It began with a mirror. Seris stood in the center of the Soul Echo Court, where the stone beneath her feet shimmered like obsidian water and the sky above flickered between night and memory. This was the final step. Her godhood would not be sealed by coronation or blood, but by a reckoning with herself. The Council of Echoes surrounded her in their floating thrones, ancient gods with glass eyes and voices like wind through hollow bones. Above them loomed the fractured heavens, still bleeding light from the rupture Seris had carved into fate. Every crack was a scar she had chosen. "You will now be judged," the central god intoned. "Not by others. By yourself." The lake below her churned, dark as ink, and then split open, revealing a vision of the past. She saw her old self. Not Seris the Reborn. Not the woman standing on the edge of divinity and ruin. But the girl she had been before, barefoot, bloodied, kneeling before the fire altar, hands trembling as she whispered an oath to the moon. "I offer my life," the past Seris murmured, "in exchange for my people's peace." A shadow moved behind her. Marekth. Younger. Softer. Reaching toward her. His eyes were full of terror, not for himself, but for her. She turned to him, smiled, and pushed him back. He screamed her name as guards held him down, but she never flinched. She looked into the fire and let it take her. Seris gasped. The memory ripped through her like a blade. She hadn't been sacrificed. She had sacrificed herself. All this time, she had blamed fate. Blamed the gods. Blamed destiny. But it had been her choice. She chose death, said a voice behind her. Just as she will again. Seris spun. Tavros stood at the edge of the dreamscape, wearing the robes of judgment, his face beautiful and empty. Beside him floated Ione, Seris's near double, a gleaming echo of perfection, eyes too still to be alive. "You still believe love is your salvation," Tavros said quietly. "But love is what led you to that altar. Love made you weak enough to choose death. Love," Seris said through clenched teeth, "made me brave enough to choose peace. You confuse martyrdom for strength. I confuse control for care," she snapped. "And I've let you control me for the last time." Tavros sighed. He reached out and Ione stepped forward, her eyes shining like mirrors. "She is everything you should have been. Everything you would have been if you had let go of your attachments. She's not me. She is better." Seris flinched. For a moment, just one flicker of weakness, she wondered, was it true? Was she the broken version of what could have been divine? Then another voice rang out. "No." The dream shattered. The court reeled. Light flooded the soul echo court as Marekth appeared, a streak of blood trailing from his temple, chains broken and fury blazing in his gaze. "She is not broken," he growled. "She is real." Guards rushed forward. Marekth didn't flinch. He crossed the lake of illusion like it was solid ground, reached Seris, and shielded her with his body. "You'll die," she whispered. "I've already died once," he said. "I don't fear a second time." "Don't," she choked, tears rising. "You don't need to protect me. Not anymore." Marekth looked at her, startled. "You're strong," she said. "But I'm not a girl on an altar anymore. I'm not something to die for." She stepped out from behind him, lifting her chin. "I'm something to fight with." Tavros sneered. "And what will you do, Seris? Defy the gods again? Shatter the sky twice?" "No," she said. "This time I'll shatter you." Ione stepped forward. "You cannot win," she said, voice soft, like snow. "You are full of cracks. You cry. You hesitate. You love." Seris's voice trembled, but didn't break. "Then I will be a god who loves. A god who hesitates. A god who cries." She stepped into the center of the ring. "And that," she said, voice rising, "makes me more than any of you." The lake boiled. The court split open. And from the chasm rose a new trial, one Seris did not run from. She faced herself. She faced her past. Her sacrifice. Her shame. Her fear. She saw the altar again. This time, she didn't turn away. She stepped toward it, took the memory of her old self by the hand, and whispered, "You don't have to die alone." The memory dissolved. Light engulfed her. Seris fell to her knees as the vision faded. When she looked up, the gods were silent. But the sky was no longer broken. It was healing. She had passed the trial. But a soft clapping echoed across the chamber. She turned. Ione stood at the edge of the sanctum, cloaked in light. The council was bowing to her. "What?" Tavros smiled. "She passed first," he said. "While you were still sleeping." "No," Seris whispered. "No, that's not." "She is the new god king," Tavros said. "They chose her." Seris's hands trembled. Marekth caught her, just before her knees gave out. "I told you," Tavros said softly, "love is the original sin. And it has cost you your crown. But as the tears slid down her face, Seris did not weep in defeat. She wept for everything she had once believed was power, and now knew was only silence. She looked up at Marekth and smiled through the tears. "Then let her wear the crown," she whispered. "I don't want it anymore." Chapter 22. The crown of her copy. The sky above the Evernight altar never brightened. It remained steeped in a violet gloom, the kind of darkness that swallowed time, that made gods forget they were ever mortal. Seris stood at the foot of the steps carved from black moonstone, breath shallow, watching as the figures of the pantheon shimmered into form, ghostly silhouettes seated on thrones of starlight and ash. At the top stood Tavros, radiant in his triumph, the silver mantle of the moon delegate already clasped around his shoulders. Beside him, the crown floated, and beneath it knelt her. Ione. Perfect posture. Seris's face, Seris's voice, Seris's stolen soul, except this one didn't tremble, didn't flinch, didn't fight. She smiled like a porcelain saint. "She carries the same blood," Tavros announced to the pantheon, arms raised. "The same memories. The same divine right. But unlike the broken one beside you, this Seris does not weep. She does not hesitate. She will not destroy what the gods created." "She is not me," Seris hissed. "She doesn't need to be," he replied. "She is better." The gods didn't speak. They didn't need to. Their silence was approval. Marekth stood at her side, body tense, one hand on his sword, but Seris knew even he couldn't strike in this court without being unmade. "You ask me to bow," Seris said slowly, "to the idea of myself. To a reflection that's never bled, never burned, never begged to survive. You ask me to submit to the thing you made for my pain." Ione tilted her head. "I remember your pain. I carry every memory. But you carry no wound," Seris snapped. "You have memory, but not meaning. You know what it felt like, but you didn't feel it." "I am what you could have been," Ione said, voice like rain on glass. "If you had been brave enough to let go of sorrow." Seris took a step forward, fists trembling. "You don't get to wear my crown. You already gave it up," Tavros cut in, smile cruel. "When you chose love over divinity." He turned to the pantheon. "We call the vote. The divine name of Seris shall be severed. The god fire stripped from her soul. Her bond with the fate sigil broken." "No," Marekth said suddenly. The word cracked through the chamber like a blade drawn in a chapel. Tavros's eyes narrowed. "You speak out of turn." She did not abandon anything. She fought for her name. "You would defend her?" Tavros asked. "Even now? When she may doom the balance of the realms. I would die for her." Tavros's smile turned thin and cold. "Good." He raised a hand, and light, vicious and searing, struck Marekth square in the chest. Seris screamed. Marekth dropped to his knees, blood splashing the altar, eyes wide in stunned silence. The blast had torn through armor, through flesh, nearly severing the heart. "No." Seris reached for him, but invisible force shoved her back. "She must choose," Tavros said, voice distant, like judgment rendered from the edge of eternity. "Surrender the godfire, or watch him die." Ione stood calmly. "This is your final test, sister. Will you let the world suffer for your love?" Seris looked at Marekth. He was shaking, barely conscious, lips parting around words she couldn't hear. She crawled toward him, hands bloody, throat raw. "Stay awake. Please, stay with me." "Seris," he rasped. "Don't give it up. Not for me." She pressed her forehead to his. "You are why I fight. You are the reason I've clawed my way through hell." Behind her, Tavros's voice rang out. "From this moment forward, the divine name of Seris is stripped. She is no longer the moon's chosen." The gods turned their eyes away. The altar dimmed. Seris felt it then. A cold, ripping void in her chest. The godfire, her godfire, was leaving her. She couldn't breathe. She couldn't scream. She collapsed beside Marekth, vision spinning. But in that void, in that silence, she heard something. His heartbeat. Faint. Dying. And still trying. Something snapped. Seris sat up slowly, blood streaking her cheeks. Her lips parted in a sob that turned into a scream of raw fury. "You want me to break?" she shouted. "Then watch me burn." She reached down and pressed her palm over Marekth's heart, and willed the godfire back. Not from the sky, not from the gods, from herself, from everything she had lost and survived, from every time she died and still risen. The sigil, torn moments before, lit again. Searing gold erupted across the chamber, searing the thrones of the gods, flaring like a second sun in the heart of night. Ion recoiled. Tavros staggered. Seris stood, cloak billowing behind her, hair whipping like wildfire. Her voice cracked as she screamed, "He is not my weakness, he is my anchor. And I would rather be damned with him than sanctified by you." She lifted Marekth into her arms and ran. Tavros bellowed a curse. Guards chased, but the sigil flared again, opening a fracture in reality. Seris didn't hesitate. She leapt through into darkness, into the one place even gods feared to follow. The land of memory. The place where her past burned eternal. Where she would go now, not to relive it, but to rewrite it. She staggered through the gate as it closed behind her, Marekth limp in her arms, blood soaking both their bodies. She fell to her knees, looked down at his pale face, and whispered, "I'll bring you back, even if I have to burn myself out to do it." Behind her, the last echo of the Pantheon's judgment faded into silence. And before her, the flames of memory lit the path to war. Chapter 23, Burning Her Name into the Stars. The forest at the world's edge did not breathe like other forests. Its trees shimmered with veins of silver, leaves whispering in forgotten tongues, roots carved into constellations. At its heart stood the star-cleft tree, old as the moons, older than fate. Beneath it, Seris knelt. Her robes were torn. Blood smeared her arms. Behind her, the tear in reality sealed shut, leaving Marekth in a protective cocoon of stilled time, suspended just beyond death. She had left him there, between breath and silence, so she could do what he would never ask. Give herself away. "You come seeking the fire of beginnings," murmured the voice from the bark, a deep, feminine echo older than divinity. The tree spoke not in words, but in dreams braided into her mind. "I come to burn my name into the stars," Seris whispered. "Even if it means forgetting every reason I once wanted to." The bark peeled open like petals, revealing a pool of dark mirror water pulsing with memory. The reflection of samsara. "You will burn your soul," warned the star-cleft tree. "You will wake as something new. And something lost." "I know." "Then enter, Seris, once Seris, and speak with your first self." She stepped forward. The mirror swallowed her. The world blinked. Seris found herself in fire. No, not fire. A memory shaped like fire. A room of no walls, only burning air and floating shards of time. At the center stood a girl cloaked in embers and smoke, skin laced with cracks that glowed molten beneath. Her eyes were familiar. So was the sadness. "Hello," said her past. Seris flinched. "You look like you. Before you gave up. You were the first Seris. I was the one who died to save the tribe. Who said yes to the gods. Who burned so you could be born." The flame girl stepped closer, and the air trembled around her like heat rising from an execution pyre. "And now you've come to take my crown," she said with a tired smile. "Or maybe to bury it." "I came to ask," Seris said, voice raw. "Is there a way to carry the fire without losing everything I love?" "You already know the answer," the girl whispered. "To become a god again, you must pay with something precious." "What?" "Your reason. Your memories. Of him." Seris froze. "No. There is no middle road. The fire will burn the name you whisper at night. The arms you run into. The tears he shed when you died. It will cleanse them all." She shook her head violently. "There must be another way." The flame girl stepped forward and touched Seris's chest. "He will live. But you will pass him like a stranger in a crowd. And still, your hands will shape destiny. Seris stared into the other her, the one who never kissed Marekth, never stood defiant in front of gods. This version had sacrificed everything and gained only silence. I don't want to become you. You don't have to. The girl pressed her burning hand against Seris's heart. You can consume me. You can forge something new. Not the god they chose. Not the sacrifice they built. Something else. But I'll forget him. You'll forget why you once loved. A long silence. Then Seris closed her eyes and whispered, "Then let me burn." The mirror flared. Her scream echoed through 100 past lives. The flame girl shattered into starlight, sinking into Seris's skin. Her veins pulsed gold, her bones hissed with divine heat. Runes spiraled over her back, shoulders, and spine. Her body arched, hovering in the void. And then dropped. The forest caught her. The Real forest. She stumbled forward, reborn. Her hair glowed faintly. Her eyes gleamed silver. Behind her, the stilled cocoon shattered. Marekth gasped, coughing blood, then dragged himself toward her. Seris, Seris. She turned. Her gaze was calm. Empty. Who are you? She asked. He stared at her, throat closing. It's me. I'm sorry, she said gently. I don't remember. His chest heaved. You called me a reason. You said you'd burn the world to keep me breathing. I believe you, she said softly. Because you're crying like someone who loved me once. He broke. Collapsed his knees. Tears bled through the dirt. I would rather you die than forget me. Seris knelt beside him, reached out to touch his face. Her hand trembled. I feel something, she whispered. But it's like holding smoke. I'll make you remember. Don't. Why? She looked up at the sky, lips trembling. Because remembering might hurt more than forgetting. Then she turned to the heavens. The gods above stirred, watching. And Seris, no longer mortal, no longer chosen, spoke with a voice that fractured clouds. I am Seris. Not the copy. Not the sacrifice. Not your broken daughter. She raised a hand. The constellations warped, reshaped. I am the moon's blade. The fate you failed to chain. She lifted her palm, and the fire in her veins erupted into the sky, writing her sigil across the stars. A new name. One the gods hadn't seen. Her name. A scream broke the air. Sudden. Sharp. Ione. She descended like a shadow, silver wings spread wide, her crown gleaming with stolen light. You burn too bright, she hissed, landing in a shudder of ash. Now I'll snuff you out. Before Seris could react, Ione struck. Not at her. At Marekth. Seris screamed. Too slow. Blood arced. Ione's blade pierced his side, divine venom shimmering across its edge. She smiled as he gasped. I offer him as a gift, she said sweetly. To Tavros. The key of your undone fate. She vanished in a cyclone of light and dust, Marektha's body with her. Seris fell to her knees. Alone again. But this time, a god with nothing left to lose. Chapter 24. The wolf bleeds for the moon. Darkness here had a sound. It was not silence, but the long, slow groan of existence stretching too thin. The wind that did not move, the echoes of prayers no longer answered. The death-sealed well was less a prison than a wound carved into the world, one that bled out everything holy. And within that wound, Marekth bled. He hung suspended in chains not of iron but of light, sigils carved from Seris's own god blood, turned against him. They dug into his wrists and ankles, peeled memory from muscle, truth from bone. Beneath him, the pit gaped endlessly. Above, stars refused to shine. Each drop of blood that fell was gathered and offered to Tavros. Marektha's head lolled to the side, breath sharp, skin too pale. His once wild hair clung to his sweat-slicked brow, strands clotted with dried red and ash. She was gone. Seris. Gone. Not dead, but gone from him. Her name still curled on his tongue like a half-burnt vow. But when he whispered it, it tasted like nothing. She had forgotten. And yet, he could still feel her fingertips on the hollow of his throat. He closed his eyes and saw her, not as she had become, not as the fire-eyed goddess, but the first time. The real first time. A field of dead gods. A single, broken altar. And her, standing barefoot in the ashes, looking down at him like he was the only thing in the world not already burning. "You shouldn't kneel," she'd said. He'd been covered in blood. His hands had just torn out the throat of the traitor who offered her up. He looked up. "Then stand me up." And she had smiled, terrified, furious, radiant. "Stupid," she'd murmured, helping him rise. "You're all teeth and curses. You'll die trying to save someone like me." "I'm not trying," he had said. "I already decided." Now, in this pit carved for gods and monsters, he remembered her laugh. And he remembered she no longer did. The chamber hissed. Footsteps. Ione descended like moonlight, robes immaculate, her hair styled just so. Her face was Seris. Her voice. Her posture. But it was a mirror's version, flawless and empty. "You dream of her often," Ione said, stepping into the circle. "Even your heartbeat stutters when you remember her name." Marekth did not lift his head. "I thought gods didn't get jealous," he rasped. "I'm not jealous," Ione said calmly. "I'm offering you peace." She moved closer, brushing a hand over his chained arm. "She's forgotten you. Not in malice, but by choice. She chose godhood over pain. Over you. I was born from her, every wound, every kiss, every failure. But I carry none of the hurt. You carry none of the love either." Ione tilted her head. "Does it matter? You want someone to hold. To believe in. I can be her, but better. I won't break. I won't forget." Marekth turned his head slowly. And looked at her. Really looked. "I once begged her to stop dying for others," he said softly. She never listened. "You would. That's how I know you're not her." Ione blinked. "I bled for a woman who would rather fall 1,000 times than let fate decide for her. She made terrible choices." She cried. She screamed. She hated herself. But she never gave in. His fingers curled despite the pain. You're the version of her made for gods who never wanted her real." "You'll die here," Ione said, voice tightening. "They're draining your god blood. Tavros is already shaping the new heart." "Then I'll die," Marekth said, "knowing I never gave her up." Ione's lips curled. "You're loyal to a shadow." "No," he whispered. "I'm loyal to the flame that burned me and never apologized." She said nothing. Above them, the blood glyphs pulsed, one step closer to hollowing him out. Far, far away, Seris stood beneath a shattered sky. The stars wept ash. The moon spun like broken coins. Her breath fogged against an air too cold to belong to the living. She had come here to prepare. To lead. To conquer what was left of herself. But her knees buckled suddenly. The god fire in her chest lurched sideways. Her lungs refused to move. And when she looked down, the moonlight on her skin turned red. She gasped. A memory surged, not a face, but a feeling. Heat. Hands. A voice. "Don't die yet. I still need to teach you how to lie." The ache twisted through her ribs. "Who?" she whispered. A phantom pain ghosted across her lips. Her fingers twitched. "He's bleeding." Somewhere, someone was bleeding for her. The stars turned. In the pit of the world, Marekth coughed blood. Tavros entered. Tall. Immaculate. Cold. The god sculptor. "Enough," he said, waving Ione back. "You've done your part. What of him? He was never meant to last. One more bloodletting, and the heart will be ready." Ione's expression flickered. She looked back at Marekth. And for the first time, she frowned. Marekth chuckled weakly. "Even your puppet feels something now." Tavros ignored him. He raised a hand. The glyphs flared. Blood surged. Marektha's scream tore the silence. Ione stepped forward, hesitated. And then, Far away, Seris's godmark exploded into light. Her knees gave out. She screamed without knowing why. Her mind snapped through memories, flashes of red, a voice calling her name. Seris, he'd once whispered, if you forget me, I'll find a way to remember for both of us. She gasped. A name. One name. But it vanished again. All that remained was the weight in her chest and the echo of someone dying. Someone who had once called her his moon. And bled to make her whole. Chapter 25. The Memory That Survived Death. The sky bled red over the floating altar. Above the broken lands, where once the moon's light wove silver through the heavens, only a stagnant crimson pulsed now, as if the world itself had forgotten to breathe. And beneath that dreadful hue, Seris stood at the edge of the blood moon sanctuary, alone, barefoot, crowned in nothing but her fury. She looked down at the ceremonial path winding toward the obsidian dais where the new god would be born. Statues of the old gods lay shattered, replaced by obsidian obelisks etched with Tavros's sigils, smooth, perfect lies carved in stone. Ione stood at the center. Seris's mirror. Her mockery. Draped in the moon's stolen silk, eyes calm and empty, she raised her arms to receive divinity. A heartbeat away from becoming the world's new god queen. Seris clenched her fist around the shaft of her soul's spear. She hadn't come to mourn. She had come to reclaim. With a scream that split the silence, Seris hurled the spear. It soared like a streak of starlight, and shattered the great bell of fate. The sound that followed was not a chime. It was a scream. Stone ruptured. The heavens roared. The ceremony ground to chaos. Guards scrambled. The priests of fate dropped to their knees. Ione flinched as shards of prophecy spun around her like glass caught in a storm. And from the red mist that rose came Seris, walking barefoot through flame. I remember, she said, voice low, trembling with godfire. Her eyes locked on Tavros. Not everything. Not his name. Not his face. But I remember what it felt like to be loved. Tavros stood at the altar, his hands still bloodied from the carving of the heart. Behind him, suspended in a pillar of godlight, was Marekth. He hung by chains of divine flame, his chest split open. His heart, not beating but glowing, was being sealed into the new god core. Marekth didn't even flinch anymore. He was almost gone. Seris froze. The moment she saw him, something in her soul snapped. That curve of a jawline. The scar below his collarbone. The way his broken body still tried to shield something. Something in her broke. Tavros stepped forward, smiling like a man who had already won. So you do remember. He tilted his head. That's good. Because I want you to watch as I end him. Seris moved. She didn't think. She burned. Through fire, through stone, through fate itself. She didn't know how she reached him, only that suddenly, she was beneath the godlight pillar, her body already unraveling as she poured all of herself into the one act that mattered. Breaking him free. She reached into the light. And screamed. Godfire tore through her veins. Her bones cracked under the pressure. Blood spilled from her mouth, her nose, her eyes. But she didn't stop. Her hands met his chest. Her fingers found the core. His heart, his real heart, still flickered there. She cupped it in both hands, trembling. Tavros roared, lunging for her. But too late. Seris closed her eyes. And offered. Her soul split. Her divinity tore. The Godsard, the last of her claim to immortality, was poured into Marektha's dying core. There was no ceremony. No music. Only silence. And then, he breathed. Marektha's body convulsed. And he screamed, a sound like the birth of a star. The divine chain shattered. He fell. And Seris caught him. Only, she was the one falling. Her knees buckled. Her vision blurred. Her divine light flickered and faded, like a candle swallowed by wind. She collapsed beside him. Marektha's eyes fluttered open, wild and disbelieving. You, Seris, what did you? She smiled faintly, fingers brushing his bloodied cheek. You were dying. I was dead. And now you're not. He sat up, pain twisting his face, holding her close. Why? You were going to be a god. You had the crown. Seris's voice was small. I didn't want the sky if you weren't in it. But you forgot me, he whispered, broken. She looked into his eyes. I forgot your name. I never forgot how you made me feel. Tears spilled down Marekth's face, mixing with ash and blood. I would have rather died than let you give this up. Then you're a hypocrite, she whispered. Because you bled for me first. Tavros's voice cracked through the red light like thunder. You gave up godhood, he snarled, striding forward. For what? A mortal? A broken, feral thing? I offered you eternity. Power. Perfection. Seris didn't look up. I don't need perfection. I don't need fate. She turned to Marekth. I only need him. Tavros roared, his form shifting, no longer man, no longer god. The entity of fate burst from his body, colossal and faceless, a shape of strings and silver blades. The earth trembled. Ione stood behind him, eyes wide. Even she hadn't seen this form. I gave you everything, the entity said in 1,000 voices. And you chose pain. Seris stood, trembling but firm. I chose memory. Marekth rose beside her. I chose her. The sky began to crack. Fate had taken form. And it was ending the age of wolves. Let the world burn, Tavros hissed, his voice layered with divinity. Erase all who deny their design. Begin with the wolves. Seris reached for Marekth's hand. He squeezed hers back. She whispered, I may have lost my light, but I still have fire. And together, they turned to face the god who would end their world. Chapter 26. The moon refuses her crown. The sky had split open. From the wound above the world, light did not pour, but order did. It fell like chains spun of stars and old blood, linking earth to sky, binding time, suffocating breath. At the center of the rift stood Tavros. Not as a man, not as a god, but as fate incarnate, the king of design, the last amalgam of every old divinity crushed and folded into the mold of inevitability. His form shimmered and distorted, cloaked in burning glyphs and halos stitched with forgotten prayers. Wings of prophecy. A crown forged of unbroken timelines. Eyes filled with every ending that had ever been imagined. And beneath him, armies moved, not marching, but pulled like puppets, strings gleaming from their spines, made of divine will and the polished cruelty of purpose. The war had begun long before the first blood was spilled. But now it raged. Seris stood atop the broken watchtower of the ruined temple. No longer crowned, no longer divine. Her skin bore no glow. Her voice carried no command. She was only a woman now. And that was what made her dangerous. There in position, said Marekth beside her. His voice was low, ragged, his wounds from the altar had not yet healed, but his gaze burned. Below, the remnants of the wolf clans had joined with the moon's last faithful, scattered, wounded, but not broken. Former gods turned traitor stood alongside feral pack lords and oath-sworn soldiers, all drawn by one impossible banner. Her. The girl who had once been god. Who now refused to be. Seris breathed in the scent of ash and steel. Signal the fire horn, she said. Marekth nodded and leapt down the shattered wall, a howl already rising from his throat. The moment the sound hit the air, the battlefield shifted. From the western cliffs, the black-furred wolves of the Elder Howl Pack surged. From the eastern ruins, the shattered moon paladins emerged in formation, wielding broken blades with sacred runes. And from the dying forest, the last-winged god, Aramil, the defector, brought down lightning with a scream that split the world in two. The sky burned. Tavros did not flinch. Predictable, he said, his voice booming through every soul. You fight, even knowing you were always meant to kneel. He raised a hand. The army stuttered, pulled back as if strings had been yanked taut. Divine fire spilled across the land. A third of the rebel forces disintegrated before they touched him. And still, Seris moved forward. Barefoot. Bleeding. Holding no weapon but her name. Tavros saw her. You're not even divine now. You walk as dust. Do you truly believe they follow you because of what you are? She smiled, though it hurt. They follow me because I walked away from the crown you offered. The god's expression flickered. Then he stepped down. Each stride cracked the earth. You were mine, Tavros said quietly. Long before your soul learned to weep. You think you chose love? I crafted your capacity for it. Seris froze. What? He stopped before her. You were my experiment, he said. An echo of a failed goddess of mercy. The love seed, sown in flesh, nurtured in fire, left to rot in mortal illusion. She said nothing. Even your pain, he murmured, was designed to give shape to your divinity. And now look, stripped of godhood, of memory, of lineage. You were nothing more than another ghost dancing to a story you didn't write. Her breath faltered. Marekth appeared behind her, wolf eyes blazing, blood slicking his jaw. Lies, he snarled. You're terrified of her. That's why you reveal it now. Tavros turned. I am incapable of terror. I am what must be. Marekth didn't move. She chose to burn her soul to save mine. No divinity, no false memory, could force that choice. She is nothing, Tavros said. A dream I discarded. Marekth stepped between them. Then let me speak as one who wasn't designed. His body shook, then shredded. Fur burst from skin. Bone cracked, expanded, reshaped. The wolf that emerged was ancient and monstrous, older than the myths, black as moonless midnight, eyes like suns eaten by grief. The first bloodline. The primal wolf. He leapt. Tavros caught him midair and, for the first time, staggered. They crashed across the battlefield in a blur of flame and claw. Seris fell to her knees, hands trembling. What Tavros said? No. No. She pressed her forehead to the dirt. Her voice cracked. Was I ever real? From the carnage, Marekth roared. You are the moon forged from fire, not his illusion. She raised her head. I was never supposed to be. A tear traced her cheek. Then another. And another. Until they glowed. Not divine. Not mortal. Something else. The memory of every life she'd lived. The pain of every choice. The fire of every moment she refused to be what they wanted. Seris stood. Ione appeared, drifting across the field like mist in a corpse garden. Her face calm, her movements perfect. You don't have to fight, she said softly. I can wear the crown. You can rest. Seris looked at her. I am tired. Ione smiled. So let me finish the story. Seris stepped forward. No. She touched the base of her own neck, where the god's car still pulsed faintly beneath her skin. I won't let him end it. Ione blinked. You would rather die than be at peace? I would rather burn than live a life written by his hand. Tavros struck Marekth down. The wolf collapsed, blood smoking, barely breathing. You fail again, Tavros said, advancing toward her. This is your story's end. The wolves die. The moon dies. You die. Seris's voice was a whisper. Maybe. She knelt beside Marekth. His breath was ragged, shallow. His eyes opened. Don't, he gasped. You'll. I told you, she said, pressing her forehead to his. I don't need to shine. I just need to burn. She stood again, faced Tavros, and smiled. You want to end fate? She opened her arms. Then let me be the ending. She lifted her hand. Not with power, but with choice. And every wolf, every god, every blade of grass beneath the bleeding sky stopped. Tavros hesitated. What are you doing? Seris exhaled. I refuse your crown. I refuse your design. The wind shrieked. You are not divine anymore. I don't need to be. And then she shattered the last piece of herself. The fragment of her soul that had been marked by divine seed. The battlefield ignited. Tavros screamed. And the sky cracked. Fate trembled. Chapter 27: The Fire That Kills the Stars. The stars bled. Not metaphorically. Not poetically. Truly, across the ruptured sky above the ancient molten pit known only as the Wanching Crucible, stars wept fire. Lines of burning celestial blood carved themselves through the heavens, pulled toward the swirling vortex of the pit where reality's foundation had once been laid, where fate had first been forged, and where Seris now stood, her body trembling beneath the weight of the flame she was about to ignite. It had no name in mortal tongue, but in the language of gods, it was called Karavian, the ember that could unmake stars. She held it in her palm, no larger than a teardrop, no heavier than a sigh. And it wanted to burn. Marekth was behind her, panting, blood coating his chest. The battle had taken everything. Even Tavros, even with his omnipotence faltering, had carved ruin through the rebellion. Only Ion's sudden betrayal, her scream, her hands thrust into her own divine heart, had bought them this moment. The god King Tavros was pinned, bleeding gold, kneeling at the edge of the crucible, his body flickering like a dying constellation. But even so, Marekth reached out. "You don't have to do this." Seris smiled. Softly. "You know that's not true." He shook his head, wild, desperate. "There's always another way. We can find it. Together." She stepped toward him, the ember pulsing between her fingers. "I asked the stars that," she whispered. "And they said no." He took her hand. It felt like touching a dying sun. "I just found you," he choked out. "Please don't make me lose you again." She leaned into him, resting her forehead against his. Her scent was ash and salt and the faintest trace of lavender, the one that lingered on his skin no matter how many lifetimes passed. "You won't lose me," she said. "You'll carry me." "No," he said, voice cracking. "Don't ask me to carry your death." She reached up, cupped his face. Her thumb wiped away a tear he hadn't realized had fallen. "We've died for each other too many times," she murmured. "Let me live in this one, Marekth. Let me choose how it ends." He kissed her. It wasn't desperate. It wasn't frenzied. It was slow, like the first snowfall after a war, like sunlight returning to a land that had forgotten it. When they parted, her lips glowed faintly with the light of the god fire, and her smile broke something inside him. She turned, faced Tavros. He was crawling now, one wing snapped, one eye bleeding light, his voice ragged. "You can't kill me. I am the end. The shape of all things. If you break the chain, the world will unravel." Seris didn't answer him. She walked past him, to the edge of the crucible, and held the flame high. Tavros screamed, "I made you." She didn't look back. "That was your mistake." She closed her eyes. "Marekth," she said. He was behind her. Still. Silent. Trembling. "I need you," she whispered. "You must be the one." His voice was a rasp. "No. If I do it myself, the fire will consume everything. But if it's by your hand, it will anchor to this purpose. My soul will burn for something. You're asking me to kill the only thing I've ever loved." She turned to him. Her eyes were glowing and wet. "And I'm asking you to let me love you back. This is my love." He stumbled forward, took her hands. The flame did not burn him, because her love wrapped around it like a shield. He knelt before her. "I won't say goodbye," he whispered. She bent down, kissed his forehead. "Then say live." He stood, lifted her hand, pressed the flame to her heart. She gasped. The light exploded. A scream tore through the realm, not hers, but Tavros's. The God King's body convulsed. His form ruptured. Threads of fate unspooled from his bones. The sky shattered into 1,000 shards, each one a destiny erased. The crucible roared open like a mouth, devouring everything. Stars went dark. The ground cracked. Marekth tried to hold on, but the force pulled him backward. As the last light of Seris's body became fire, she turned to him and smiled. "You're free now," she mouthed. Then, nothing. Just heat. And silence. And collapse. He woke in the ruins of the lost skystair. Blood in his mouth. Ash in his lungs. He tried to rise, his body screamed. But he crawled. He reached the broken altar. And found nothing but dust. Until on the scorched stone, burned into the shape of a crescent moon. Her name. Seris. He screamed. But not in rage. Not in grief. In memory. Because as he collapsed again, the smoke curled above him. And in it, he saw her face. Smiling. And the whisper came like a breeze through the ashes. "You're free." Chapter 28. The Wolf Who Refused to Kneel. Ash blanketed the earth like fallen snow. The bones of gods jutted from the blackened soil, jagged as grief, silent as the dead stars above. The sky no longer shimmered with divine order, only with emptiness. And beneath that hollow dome, Marekth stood alone. His body was broken. His right arm no longer moved. Scars ran like rivers over his back, chest, jaw. The remnants of the final explosion, her fire, still shimmered across his skin, a memory that refused to fade. And in his heart, a silence where her name used to echo. The others, those few who had survived the cataclysm, watched from the shadows. The last of the wolves, bloodied and ragged. A handful of God-touched survivors who had chosen rebellion over obedience. None dared approach him. He was no longer merely Alpha. He was something more. And something less. He was the one who had lived. And gods have never looked kindly on the living. He made his way toward the shattered ruins of the old Fate Spring, the place where destinies had once been birthed and shaped like clay. It had survived even the starfire. But now it shimmered with something else. A whisper. A pull. A temptation. He stepped toward it, slow and heavy. The spring's surface rippled. And his voice came from it. No, not his. Hers. Marekth. He froze. The whisper came again, like wind through dying leaves. "Help me." It was her voice. Her tone. The one that used to pull him back from madness, from bloodlust, from despair. But it wasn't real. He knew it. He tasted it in his bones. Then another voice, deeper, smoother, slick as oil, and just as choking. Tavros. Or what remained of him. "You see," the voice murmured. "She's still here. A thread in the fabric. A flame beneath the ash. Let me pull her back." Marekth didn't answer. "Don't you want her back?" Tavros purred. "A world where she breathes again. Smiles again. Loves again. You could have it. The spring still works. I can shape it, reshape her if needed. No one needs to know." Marekth stepped closer to the spring. And knelt. He reached out. Touched the water. And saw her face. Seris. In the firelight. In the dark. In 1,000 half-memories. She reached for him. He closed his eyes. Then stood. Turned away. And said, "If she can't come back by her own will, I won't drag her from where she chose to burn." The spring convulsed. The voice snarled. "You arrogant beast. You would deny the gods their cycle." "No," Marekth said. "I deny you." The earth trembled beneath his feet. From the ruined edges of the spring, golden tendrils rose, remnants of fate, of command, of divine rewrite. They surged toward him, wrapping his limbs, trying to bind him to the wheel again. But this time, he didn't fight them like a beast. He commanded. Blood from his mouth. From his palm. From the old wound in his chest that had never fully healed. He opened his veins. Let the wolf bleed. And with it, his soul. "I seal this spring," he roared, voice echoing across the ruins, not in the name of gods, not for power, not for vengeance. "I seal it with love." The tendrils screamed as they burned. The water boiled into steam. And in its death throes, Tavros's voice broke into shrieking laughter. "You think this changes anything? You're worms, Marekth. You crawl through time thinking it belongs to you. But even your love, it was written by me. Marektha's hand curled into a fist. You never wrote her heart. The final pulse of the spring flared, then died. Silence reigned. He staggered back, collapsed his knees. And this time, there was no one to hold him. No warmth at his back. No soft hand on his shoulder. Just wind. And the ashes of a broken world. He buried her name into the soil with his breath. Seris. And the ground did not answer. But the moon did. Later, much later, when the night rose again and the blood moon crept across the sky, Marekth stood atop the high cliffs of the moon-born crag, watching the sky with unreadable eyes. The wolves behind him rebuilt slowly. No gods. No thrones. Just scars and soil and the beginnings of new breath. And every time the blood moon came, the light struck the cliffside. And in the red blaze, a shape could sometimes be seen. A woman of flame. Hair trailing like smoke. Eyes like embers. She never spoke. She never wept. But she smiled. And Marekth would whisper, I never knelt. And the wind would howl like a wolf that remembered. A world reborn not by gods, but by a love that even fire could not kill. Chapter 29. Ashes Beneath the Crown. The nights had stopped ending. The sky, once loyal to the cycles of sun and moon, now hung in perpetual dusk. Stars flickered behind thick clouds like half-forgotten names. And Marekth, the crowned wolf king of a godless age, watched the stillborn heavens with eyes that had forgotten how to hope. He ruled not from a throne but from ruins. The Wolf King's temple had been rebuilt stone, by claw, by will, by grief. Its bones stood tall against the wind, but its heart remained empty. The priests of old were gone. The gods who made them too. Only the wolves remained. And him. Each moonless month, when the sky tried to remember how to shine, Marekth left his council chambers without word. No one stopped him anymore. Not even the ones who feared he might never return. He walked alone as he always had. Across the new moon plains, where grass had grown over what used to be a battlefield. Past the wild shade rivers, which now whispered quieter songs. To the edge of the world. The dusk grave. A barren knoll, blackened and silent. The place where the starfire had burned its brightest. The place she had chosen to die. Her ashes had long since scattered. The crater left behind had softened into moss. Yet the earth remembered. It always did. So did he. Marekth knelt on the cool earth, fingertips brushing charred stone. The wind never touched this place. It was too sacred. Too haunted. He sat in silence. Closed his eyes. Waited. And tonight, something changed. A flicker. Faint as a breath caught in a dream. A curl of silver-blue flame rose from the ground, no fire he knew. It danced like memory, pulsing with a heartbeat that was not his. Then, a voice. Soft as moonlight. Sharp as truth. I remember you. He didn't move. Not at first. His whole body had gone still, like a predator stunned by beauty. Then his head lifted, slowly, painfully. The flame grew. It shaped itself, not into her body, but into her essence. The tilt of a jawline. The curve of a smile. Her presence, so unmistakably her that his soul ached. Seris, he whispered. She she glowed brighter. You look older, she teased gently. He laughed, a sound broken at the edges. You died. I had to grow up. And yet, she said, flickering closer, you still kneel when you see me. He swallowed hard. This is a dream, isn't it? She didn't answer. He reached for her. His hand passed through the flame, but he felt it. Not heat. Not pain. Something else. Recognition. I tried, he murmured. To bring you back. To hold on to something of you. But she interrupted. You didn't need to. You let the world keep going. That's harder. I didn't want it to go on without you. You didn't let it go on without me, she corrected. You let it go on for me. His throat burned. I didn't get to save you. She shimmered, moved as if to touch his cheek. but you saved what I believed in." He closed his eyes. "They tell stories now. About the moon who burned herself to stop the gods. They call you holy." "Don't let them," she said, voice sharpening. "I was never holy. I was angry. I was tired. I was in love." His breath hitched. "I missed you," he said. "Then remember me right." He opened his eyes. She was fading. The flame dimmed, like breath leaving glass. But she wasn't afraid. Her voice didn't tremble. "Marekth." He straightened. "Yes. If the world has gods again, make sure they are the kind you would kneel for." He stared. "Because I never wanted anyone to kneel for me," she said. Then, a smile. A flicker. Gone. He remained kneeling. A breeze stirred. This time, it was warm. Behind him, the horizon cracked with pale light. The dawn. The first in months. He looked back to where the flame had vanished. Not a trace remained. Not even ash. But in his chest, something stirred. Not hope. Not yet. But the memory of love that never needed to live forever to be real. He stood. He would walk back. He would lead again. Not as a king for gods, but as a wolf who remembered. Chapter 30. The moon watches still. The star dome was silent. Even the youngest wolves held their breath beneath its vast curve, where constellations bloomed in threads of silver fire across midnight stone. Each star had its name. Each shimmer a story. The kind told in murmurs, when the wind outside the new moon hall howled like ancient gods mourning their own extinction. Marekth stood at the center of the room, taller than he'd ever been, older than most thought possible. His eyes, once filled with fire, now held something deeper. Something that time could not burn away. "Who can tell me the shape of freedom?" he asked, voice low, resonant. A dozen pups perked up. Some shifted awkwardly, others stretched their paws to the stars above, as if trying to grab the right answer from the sky itself. "Is it the breaking of chains?" asked one with moss-green eyes. "A life without gods," whispered another. "A name that no one gave you," said a third. Marekth listened. Smiled, faint and worn at the edges. "Good," he said. "All of that. And more. Because freedom isn't a thing you're given. It's a fire. And you must choose to keep it burning." The pups nodded, though they didn't fully understand. Not yet. They would. Behind Marekth, etched into the highest wall of the observatory, burned a flame that never went out. Not fed by wood. Not by spell. Just a single point of light that flickered like a heartbeat. The remembrance flame. She was not named. Never depicted. But every child in the Wolflands knew who she was. "The moonfire," one pup whispered. "Is it true it used to be a woman?" "Not just a woman," another added, ears twitching. "A goddess who chose to die." Marekth didn't correct them. Didn't speak. Instead, he turned and walked to the memorial terrace. The night wind was cold, but not cruel. Below the platform, the Valley of Ash had long since bloomed again. Forests grew where gods had fallen. Flowers grew from stone. And above it all, a single star glowed red. Unblinking. Unyielding. He stood in silence, letting memory rise, not as pain now, but something quieter. Something gentler. A weight he carried willingly. She had died for a world that didn't yet know how to deserve her. But he had made sure it would learn. He felt the soft tug of a child's paw on his cloak. "Is it true?" the pup asked, golden-eyed and full of wonder. "That the woman in the fire was the one you loved?" He didn't answer. He only looked up. At that single, eternal star. The one that never faded. The one that never blinked. And whispered, "She's still watching." Later, when the pups were led to bed and the moon hung low in the sky like a secret, Marekth sat alone beside the remembrance flame. The stone beneath him was warm. The sky endless. He pulled from his pocket a scrap of faded cloth, once red, now scorched brown, the last remnant of a sash once tied around her wrist. He pressed it to his lips. "You burned brighter than all of them," he said softly. Even now, wind stirred. For a heartbeat, just one, it smelled like her. like fire and moonlight. Then it was gone. But the star remained. And as he rose, older, heavier, tired but whole, he felt no sadness. Only certainty. She was still there, watching. And so long as the wolves remembered her fire, her voice, her defiance, she would never truly be gone. Far above, in the endless night sky, the star flared once, just once, as if answering him. And across the sky's curve, at the edge of the world, a shimmer formed. A figure cloaked in flame, her hair like falling embers, her back to the stars, watching the earth she had once burned to save. Not a ghost. Not a god. Just a girl who chose. And would never be forgotten.